The Hungarian wilderness roared under a tempest's wrath, rain slashing through the night like shards of glass, the wind howling a dirge for forgotten souls. Lightning fractured the sky, casting jagged silhouettes of twisted pines and sheer cliffs, framing St. Magdalene Convent, a Gothic fortress perched on a fog-shrouded hill, its spires stabbing the heavens like accusatory fingers. Clara Harris, 22, an American anthropology student with fire in her green eyes, battled the storm, her boots sinking into churning mud. Her flashlight's beam wavered, a frail lance against the oppressive dark, illuminating gnarled roots and slick stones that threatened to betray her footing. In her trembling hand, a tattered notebook brimmed with sketches of occult runes, each line a breadcrumb in her obsessive quest for truth, the trail whispered in dusty archives across continents. "Almost there," she murmured, her voice lost to the gale, her breath a fleeting ghost in the freezing air. The convent's iron gates loomed, rusted and half-open, hinges creaking, a warning etched in their twisted metal, as if guarding secrets too heavy for the world. A wolf's howl sliced through the night, raw and primal, prickling her skin, but Clara gripped the dagger at her belt, its blade a cold anchor against her palm. She slipped through, the gates groaning shut like a tomb seal, locking her in a realm of stone and shadow. Inside, the convent was a mausoleum, its silence a weight that pressed against her chest, heavier than the storm's fury. The air reeked of mildew, dust, and a sour undercurrent, decay, or perhaps something older, more sinister. Clara descended a spiral staircase into the crypt, her footsteps echoing off damp stone, each sound a violation of the oppressive quiet. Her flashlight swept over moss-covered tombs, their inscriptions eroded by time, and chains dangling from the ceiling, rusted but menacing, swaying faintly as if stirred by unseen hands. At the crypt's heart stood a hidden altar, its surface carved with runes that pulsed with a faint, malevolent glow, alive with an energy that crawled under her skin. Atop it lay the Blood Codex, a leather-bound tome, its cover stained a deep, arterial red, as if bled upon by centuries of sacrifice. Clara's heart thundered, a drumbeat of awe and dread. "It's real," she whispered, her fingers brushing the book's icy surface, a jolt of cold piercing her bones. She opened it, pages crackling like brittle bones, revealing secrets of the eternal blood pact and a name, Clara, Mater Tenebris, Mother of Darkness. Her voice, trembling yet driven by reckless hunger, read aloud, "By blood we bind, by silence we hold." The words hung heavy, the key turning in a lock best left untouched, the air tightening around her like a noose. A candle on the altar flared without touch, its flame a sickly green, casting grotesque shadows that writhed like serpents across the walls. The crypt grew frigid, shadows clawing at her vision's edges, her flashlight flickering, then dying, plunging her into near darkness. Clara stumbled back, pulse hammering, dagger drawn. "What the hell?" she gasped, her voice echoing, unanswered. From the darkness emerged a figure, a woman in a tattered nun's habit, her face veiled, eyes black voids that drank the light. "The Wraith Nun," Clara laughed, a guttural sound that scraped Clara's soul, raw and inhuman, like nails on a coffin's lid. Clara slashed her dagger, screaming, "Stay back," her blade cutting air, her movements frantic. The wraith moved like smoke, dodging each strike, laughter swelling into a cacophony. Clara lunged, but Clara seized her wrist, twisting with bone-crushing force, the dagger clattering to stone. Claws clamped her throat, wounds blazed red, the crypt quaked as if rejecting her intrusion. Clara's screams were swallowed by a darkness deeper than night, Clara's laugh a blade carving the void. 2 weeks later, his father lay smothered in a fog that clung like grief, its muddy streets and squat houses cloaked in mournful grey, a village suspended in 1983's Cold War chill. Daniel Cole, 36, stepped off a rickety bus, his leather jacket dusted with travel's grime, a cigarette glowing between his lips, its ember a defiant spark in the gloom. Once an FBI agent, now a private detective, Daniel bore the scar of his sister Lily's disappearance 12 years ago in New York, a wound that festered in his dreams. Hired to find Clara Harris, a missing American student, the job felt like chasing Lily's ghost through another dead end, but the client's money was good, and answers were all he had left to hunt. Villagers shuffled past, their eyes darting, some crossing themselves, muttering about the cursed convent on the hill, their voices thick with a fear rooted in folklore and loss. Daniel flicked his cigarette away, smirking to mask unease, his city-honed skepticism dismissing ghost stories. Yet his father's dread clung like damp cloth as he pushed into the local inn, a smoky den reeking of stale beer, tobacco, and unspoken secrets, its walls adorned with faded photos of a Hungary trapped in time. Zsuzsa, the innkeeper, stood behind the bar, her weathered face sharp with suspicion, her movements precise, a hunter's grace honed by years of survival. In her 40s, her eyes missed nothing, reading Daniel like an open case file. "Whiskey?" she asked, her accent thick as the fog. Daniel nodded, sliding onto a stool, the creak of wood loud in the quiet. "And answers," he said, exhaling smoke. Clara Harris, 22, American, vanished near St. Magdalene Convent. "What do you know?" Zsuzsa's hand faltered as she poured, the glass clinking against the counter, her gaze darkening. "You going there?" she said, voice low, a warning wrapped in resignation. "The Wraith Nun takes those who get too close." Daniel's smirk returned, though it felt hollow. "Tourist bait," he said, but Zsuzsa leaned in, her eyes flint hard. "My son, 15 years ago, went near that place. Never came back. Black eyes, no face, she's no story, American." Her words carried loss, a language Daniel spoke fluently, his smirk fading as memories of Lily surfaced, unbidden. "Point me to the convent," he said, tone clipped, stubbing out his cigarette. Zsuzsa sighed, sliding a napkin across the bar, a crude map scratched in ink, its lines trembling as if drawn by fear. "Hill Path," she said, then pressed a silver dagger into his hand, its blade etched with runes that shimmered faintly, an artifact out of place in this Soviet-shadowed village. "For the Wraith," she said, her haunted gaze locking with his. Daniel pocketed the dagger, skeptical but unwilling to dismiss the weight in her eyes, a mother's grief mirrored in his own. As he left, 3 local thugs eyed his duffel bag, their intent clear in their hunched postures and glinting knives. Daniel's instincts, sharpened by years in dark alleys, flared. When the leader lunged, blade flashing, Daniel sidestepped, snapping the man's wrist with a crack that echoed in the fog. Another swung a pipe, but Daniel ducked, slamming his fist into the thug's jaw, teeth scattering. The third charged, knife aimed at his gut, but Daniel kneed his groin, dropping him gasping. They sprawled in the mud, groaning, their bravado broken. Zsuzsa watched from the doorway, a faint smile curving her lips, a nod of respect. "Careful, American," she called, her voice carrying over the mist. Daniel adjusted his jacket, the dagger a cold weight, and headed for the hill, the convent's shadow looming like a predator ready to strike, its secrets waiting to unravel him. The path to St. Magdalene Convent twisted through a forest of skeletal pines, their branches clawing at the fog like fingers of the damned, the air growing denser with each step, a clawing weight that pressed against Daniel Cole's chest. The convent spires pierced the mist, black and jagged against a sky bruised by dawn's reluctance, their iron gates groaning as he pushed through, the sound a low, mournful wail that echoed in his bones. The courtyard beyond was a desolate expanse of cracked cobblestones and choking weeds, flanked by stone gargoyles with hollow eyes, their carved mouths frozen in silent screams, as if they'd witnessed the convent's sins and could not unsee them. Daniel's hand rested on the silver dagger in his pocket, a reflex honed by years of facing danger in back alleys and shadowed precincts, his city instincts clashing with the primal dread this place exhaled. The convent loomed, its walls scarred by centuries of wind, rain, and secrets, its windows dark save for fleeting flickers of candlelight that danced like ghosts, mocking the dawn. A bell tolled, slow and heavy, its clang reverberating through the fog, sending a shiver down his spine that he shook off with a muttered, "Just a job." But the silence felt alive, a predator watching, its breath cold against his neck, whispering of truths he wasn't ready to face. A group of nuns glided across the courtyard, their black habits trailing like liquid shadow, their faces veiled, their movements eerily synchronized, not a whisper escaping their ranks. Daniel's gut tightened, his years facing killers and cartels paling against the uncanny menace of these silent figures, their presence more spectral than human. One nun, younger, paused, her eyes meeting his through her veil, wide and pleading, a spark of humanity that caught his breath, stirring a warmth he hadn't felt since Lily's smile faded from his life. She hurried after the others, her silhouette swallowed by the fog, leaving him alone in the courtyard's oppressive hush. Mother Veronica emerged from the convent's arched doorway, her presence a storm in human form, commanding the air like a general on a battlefield. In her 60s, she moved with regal authority, her black habit pristine, untouched by the courtyard's grime, her eyes sharp as obsidian blades, glinting with a knowledge that made Daniel's skin crawl. "Mr. Cole," she said, her voice smooth but laced with ice, cutting through the silence like a scalpel. "You hear about Clara Harris, I presume?" Daniel nodded, sizing her up, his instincts screaming she was no mere nun, her composure a mask for something darker. "Last seen near your gates," he said, his tone steady despite the unease coiling in his gut. "I need to ask some questions." "We are a cloistered order," Veronica replied, her smile a thin, dangerous blade, her words precise, rehearsed. "Bound by a vow of silence, we know nothing of outsiders." Daniel raised an eyebrow, his voice dry, honed by years of interrogations. "Locals say she was poking around. Someone saw something." Veronica's gaze hardened, a flicker of anger, or fear, crossing her face, brief but unmistakable. "Curiosity is a dangerous sin, Mr. Cole," she said, her tone a warning wrapped in piety. "You may search, but respect our sanctity, or you'll find trouble you cannot escape." She gestured to the young nun, Sister Agnes, her name a whisper carried on the fog, heavy with unspoken meaning. Agnes led Daniel inside, her steps hesitant, her veiled face turned slightly toward him, as if torn between duty and something deeper. As they passed through a grand hall, Daniel's eyes caught a portrait on the wall, a nun from the 1600s, her face eerily identical to Clara's, her expression serene yet haunting, her eyes seeming to follow him with a knowing gaze. The inscription read Clara, Mater Tenebris. He stopped, pointing, his voice sharp. "Who's this?" Agnes glanced back, fear flickering in her eyes, a shadow of dread that made his pulse quicken. Veronica's voice sliced through, cold and final, "Sister Clara, a revered figure." Now, Sister Agnes will show you to your room." Daniel followed Agnes down a corridor lined with faded tapestries depicting martyred saints, their woven eyes bleeding crimson threads, but the portrait's gaze lingered, boring into his back like a warning from the grave, a harbinger of the horrors waiting to unfold. The guest room was a cell carved from cold stone, its meager comforts a creaky bed sagging under years of neglect, a single flickering candle casting jittery shadows, and a crucifix leaning forward on the wall, its carved Christ seeming to judge with hollow eyes. Daniel dropped his duffel bag, the thud echoing in the oppressive silence, his muscles aching from the trek through Kisvarda's fog. He pulled out a faded photograph of Lily, his sister, her smile frozen at 20, a relic of a life before loss tore his world apart. He traced her face with a calloused finger, the old pain rising like a tide, sharp and unrelenting. "I couldn't save you," he murmured, his voice rough, thick with 12 years of guilt. "But I'll find Clara. I swear it." He tucked the photo away, lying down, the bed groaning under his weight, the wind howling outside like a chorus of mourners, their cries weaving through the convent's stone walls. Sleep refused to come, the convent silence unnatural, a heavy shroud that pressed against his chest, stifling his breath. Then, a sound broke through, faint, dissonant chanting, seeping through the walls like poison, its rhythm alien, its notes clawing at his nerves. Daniel sat up, grabbing his flashlight, its beam a weak defiance against the dark, his heart quickening with a mix of curiosity and dread. "What the hell is that?" he muttered, slipping into the corridor, his boots silent on the worn stone, the air frigid, the candlelight casting twisted shadows that seemed to writhe like living things, mocking his intrusion. The chanting led him through a maze of corridors, past tapestries of bleeding saints and locked doors etched with symbols that stirred unease, their lines faintly familiar from Clara's notebook sketches. He reached a heavy oak door, its surface carved with runes that matched those notes, their curves pulsing with a dim, sickly red glow, as if the wood itself bled. The chanting stopped abruptly, leaving a silence so profound it rang in his ears, a void that swallowed sound and hope. Daniel pressed his ear to the door, hearing only the thud of his own pulse, his breath shallow, his hand hovering over the dagger in his pocket. Then, a whisper, soft, feminine, chilling, "Lily." The word was a blade, slicing through his defenses, freezing his blood. He spun, flashlight sweeping the corridor, its beam catching nothing but shadows, the air thick with menace. At the hall's end, a mirror reflected his pale, strained face, and something else. A figure in a tattered nun's habit, eyes black as death, stood behind him, her veiled face a void, her presence a violation of reality. The Wraith Nun. Daniel whirled, heart hammering, but the corridor was empty, the mirror showing only darkness, its glass fogged as if breathed upon by something unholy. His breath came in sharp gasps, the whisper echoing in his mind, "Lily. She's dead," he told himself, voice shaking, but doubt gnawed at him, a splinter of fear he couldn't dislodge, memories of Lily's laughter twisting into screams. He tried the door again, rattling the handle with force, but it held fast, unyielding as the convent's secrets, its runes seeming to pulse in time with his racing heart. Footsteps approached, soft, deliberate, almost hesitant, their rhythm out of place in this tomb of silence. Daniel ducked into an alcove, his hand gripping the dagger, its silver a cold comfort, his body tense as he watched. Sister Agnes appeared, her veil lifted, revealing a face delicate yet haunted, her wide eyes a storm of fear and resolve, her skin pale under the candlelight's flicker. She slipped a piece of paper under the door, her movements swift, her breath catching as if she sensed the weight of her betrayal. She froze, head tilting, feeling his presence, her hand trembling as it hovered near her habit's folds. "Don't move," Daniel said, stepping out, his voice low but firm, cutting through the silence like a blade. Agnes gasped, her hand flying to her chest, her eyes locking onto his, wide with panic yet holding a flicker of defiance. "What's on that paper?" he demanded, keeping distance but closing the gap with his gaze, his flashlight steady on her face. It's been casting harsh shadows that deepened her fear. She hesitated, lips trembling, then whispered, breaking her sacred vow, her voice a fragile thread laced with terror, "Clara's in the crypt. Veronica lies." Her words were a spark in the dark, igniting questions he wasn't ready to face, his pulse quickening with the weight of her confession. Before he could press further, a bell tolled, its deep clang reverberating through the stone, shaking the air with a finality that made Agnes's face pale, her eyes darting to the shadows as if expecting retribution. She fled, her habit billowing like a phantom, vanishing into the corridor's depths, leaving Daniel alone with the paper, his hands unsteady as he retrieved it. The words were scrawled in haste, ink smudged by trembling fingers, "She's in the crypt. Don't trust Veronica." He stared at the locked door, the wraith's whisper a splinter twisting deeper, Lily's name a wound reopened, the convent silence a lie that hid horrors he was only beginning to grasp. This case was no longer just a job, it was a descent into something personal, something that knew his sister's name, trap woven into the stones of St. Magdalene, waiting to claim him. Morning draped his father in a fog that clung like a shroud, its grey tendrils weaving through the village's muddy streets, muffling sound and hope. Daniel's head throbbed from a sleepless night, the wraith's whisper, Lily, looping in his mind, a taunt that gnawed at his sanity, Sister Agnes's note a burning weight in his pocket, Clara's in the crypt. Don't trust Veronica. The convent was a locked vault, its secrets guarded by silence and something darker, a force that pulsed beneath its stones. If he was to find Clara, or answers about Lily, his father was his only lead, its people the keepers of truths the convent refused to yield. He stormed into the inn, the door creaking under his push, his eyes burning with purpose, the weight of the silver dagger in his pocket a cold reminder of Juju's warning. The inn was dim, its air thick with tobacco and despair, the walls lined with faded photographs of a Hungary frozen in Soviet gloom, a village caught between folklore and fear. Juju stood behind a bar, polishing glasses with a rhythm that spoke of restless nights, her sharp eyes reading him like a suspect in a lineup. "You saw something up there," she said, her voice flat, not a question, her hands pausing as she set a glass down with a clink. Daniel slid onto a stool, lighting a cigarette, the smoke curling like the fog outside, its acrid bite grounding him. "Maybe," he said, exhaling, his tone guarded but urgent. "Clara's journal, where'd you get it?" Juju nodded to a corner where Clara's backpack slumped against the wall, its canvas stained with mud, a relic of her reckless quest. "A villager found it near the convent gates," she said, her tone heavy, her eyes narrowing as if weighing his worth. She was obsessed with that place, poking into things best left buried. "Foolish girl." Daniel rifled through the bag, his fingers brushing worn fabric, his heart quickening as he pulled out the journal. Its pages were a chaotic map of Clara's mind, sketches of runes matching those on the crypt door, notes on the blood codex, references to Clara, a nun burned for witchcraft in 1650, her name a curse whispered in the village's shadows. The final entry sent a chill through him, the ink smudged as if written in panic. I opened it. "It sees me." The words were a confession, a warning, a plea, their weight sinking into his bones like the fog outside. He flipped further, his breath catching as his fingers brushed something cold and metallic, a silver locket, tucked between pages, its surface engraved with Lily's initials, the same locket she'd worn the day she vanished in New York, 12 years ago. "Impossible," he muttered, his hands trembling as he opened it, revealing a faded photo of Lily, her smile bright, her eyes alive with a joy he'd failed to protect. His vision blurred, the world narrowing to that small, gleaming object, a relic of loss that defied reason. Zsuzsa watched, her face unreadable but tense, her fingers gripping the bar's edge. "The Wraith plays tricks," she said softly, her voice laced with a mother's grief, mirroring his own. "Or someone wanted you to find that." Daniel's mind reeled, questions colliding like shards of glass. Lily's locket in Clara's bag. It was a violation of logic, a thread tying his past to this cursed place, a trap he couldn't yet see. He leaned forward, his voice hard, cutting through the inn's haze. "What else do you know?" "No more half-truths." Zsuzsa's eyes met his, glinting with resolve, her voice low, weighted by years of loss. The convent was built on a pagan site, older than Christ himself. Blood sacrifices, dark rites, Clara's pact wasn't with God, but with something beneath the stones. The nun's silence keeps her spirit caged, or so they claim, but it's failing, and Clara's meddling woke her. Her words were a map to the abyss, each syllable a stone paving his descent. Before he could press further, the inn's door burst open with a crash, splintering wood echoing like a gunshot. 3 thugs, the same ones he'd fought in the fog, stormed in, their knives gleaming, faces twisted with rage, the leader's wrist bandaged, his eyes burning with vengeance. "American, you're dead," he snarled, his voice thick with a guttural accent, his blade flashing in the dim light. Daniel stood, cracking his knuckles, a grim smile on his lips, his body coiling like a spring. "Big mistake, pal," he said, his voice low, deadly. The fight erupted in a blur of violence, the inn's smoky air alive with grunts and steel. Daniel ducked a slashing blade, grabbing the leader's arm, twisting until it snapped, the man screamed a sharp note in the chaos. Another thug swung a pipe, its metal whistling, but Daniel sidestepped, slamming his fist into the man's jaw, teeth scattering across the floor. The third lunged, knife aimed at his chest, but Zsuzsa was faster. She hurled a whiskey bottle, the glass shattering against the thug's skull, dropping him like a stone, blood pooling in the sawdust. The fight ended as swiftly as it began. The thugs sprawled in the wreckage, groaning, their defiance broken. Zsuzsa wiped her hands on her apron, her face unfazed, a warrior in a village of ghosts. "Go back to the convent," she said, her voice steady, her eyes locking with his. "But watch the young nun, the one who looks at you with more than fear. She's not like the others." Daniel nodded, pocketing the locket and journal, their weight heavier than the dagger, his mind a storm of questions. As he stepped into the fog, Zsuzsa's words echoed like a prophecy, "Someone wanted you to find that." The convent waited, its secrets coiled like a serpent ready to strike, and Daniel knew he was walking straight into its jaws, the truth about Lily and Clara a shadow he couldn't outrun. The fog clung to St. Magdalene's courtyard like a mourner's veil, its grey tendrils weaving through cracked cobblestones, swallowing the convent spires in a haze that pulsed with secrets. Daniel trudged back from his father, Lily's locket a cold weight in his pocket, its impossible presence a splinter in his mind, tying his sister's loss to this cursed place. The Wraith's whisper, "Lily," echoed, a taunt that gnawed at his sanity, while Sister Agnes's note burned in his thoughts, Clara's in the crypt. "Don't trust Veronica." The nun's silence was a weapon, their veiled gazes a labyrinth of deceit, but Agnes was different, her glance in the hall a spark of humanity, rebellion, a warmth that stirred a long-buried hope in his chest. He crossed the courtyard, the stone gargoyles leering, their hollow eyes seeming to track his steps, their carved mouths whispering accusations in the fog's hush. The air was heavy, the silence a living thing that pressed against his skin, colder than the dawn's reluctant light. Inside the grand hall, Mother Veronica waited, her presence a cold blade slicing through the candlelit gloom, her black habit pristine, her eyes sharp as obsidian, glinting with a knowledge that made his gut twist. "You've been to the village," she said, her voice cutting like a winter wind, each word measured, a warning cloaked in piety. "Stirring trouble among the superstitious, no doubt." Daniel met her gaze, his jaw tight, his city instincts clashing with the primal dread she exuded. "I'm doing my job," he said, his tone steady, honed by years of facing liars. "Clara Harris was here, wasn't she? Locals saw her near your gates." Veronica's smile was venomous, a predator's baring of teeth, her composure a mask that didn't quite hide the flicker of unease in her eyes. "You assume much, Mr. Cole," she said, her voice low, a threat wrapped in silk. "Our vow of silence protects us, and you, if you're wise. Break it, and you'll invite consequences beyond your understanding." She turned to leave, her habit sweeping the stone like a shadow, but Daniel caught movement in the gloom, an alcove where Sister Agnes stood, her veil raised, revealing a face delicate yet haunted, her wide eyes a storm of fear and defiance, a silent rebellion against Veronica's iron rule. Her gaze locked onto his, a fleeting connection that caught his breath, stirring a warmth he hadn't felt since Lily's laughter filled his days. She nodded subtly, a signal, then slipped away, her footsteps silent but her presence lingering like a spark in the convent's icy grip, a beacon in its darkness. Daniel followed her path, his pulse quickening, drawn by instinct and something deeper, a pull he couldn't name. The corridor led to a cloister garden, overgrown with thorny roses that seemed to clutch at the air, their blackened petals dripping dew like blood, their scent sour, mingling with the fog's damp chill. Agnes stood by a cracked fountain, its basin choked with moss, her back to him, her shoulders tense, her habit swaying faintly in the breeze. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, her voice a fragile thread, barely audible above the fog's murmur, her words trembling with fear and resolve. Daniel stepped closer, his boots crunching on gravel, his voice low, steady, cutting through the garden's hush. "You said Clara's in the crypt. Help me find her." Agnes trembled, her hands twisting the edge of her habit, her body coiled as if expecting a blow. "Veronica, she sees everything," she said, her voice breaking, her fear a tangible weight. "If she knows I spoke, she'll..." Her words faltered, swallowed by dread, but Daniel touched her shoulder, gentle but firm, grounding her in the moment, his city-honed instinct softening under her vulnerability. "I lost someone too," he said, his voice rough with 12 years of guilt, his hand steady despite the storm in his chest. "My sister, Lily. I won't let Clara end up like her, and I won't let Veronica hurt you." Agnes turned, her eyes searching his, their depths a mix of terror and longing, a spark that shrank the world to just them, the fog muffling the convent's menace. "I dreamed of leaving once," she said, her voice a confession, soft as a prayer. "Before the vow took me, before this place, now I'm trapped, like they all are." Her vulnerability cracked something in Daniel, a warmth he buried beneath years of grief and grit, a fire kindled in the convent's cold heart. Their hands brushed, a fleeting spark in the chill, their fingers lingering longer than they should, a forbidden connection that sent his pulse racing. He leaned closer, drawn by a pull stronger than reason, their breath mingling in the fog, a scent, faint lavender and fear, stirring a longing he couldn't name. But a bell tolled, its deep clang shattering the fragile moment, reverberating through the stone, making Agnes flinch, her face paling as if the sound summoned judgment. "Meet me at midnight, by the crypt door," she whispered, her voice urgent, her eyes darting to the shadows. "Please, be careful." She fled, her habit billowing like a phantom, vanishing into the garden's gloom, leaving Daniel among the thorns, his heart pounding with resolve and a dangerous hope, the convent's secrets tightening around him like a noose. Midnight cloaked St. Magdalene Convent in a shroud of shadow, the air thick with an unspoken menace that clung to Daniel Cole's skin like damp cloth. He crept through the corridors, his flashlight into a faint glow, each step a calculated risk, the silver dagger in his pocket a cold anchor against the dread pulsing through him. The crypt door was his goal, where Agnes had promised answers, but Clara's journal, tucked in his jacket, pointed to another lead, the library, where the blood codex might lurk, its secrets the key to unraveling this nightmare. The convent's silence was a predator, its breath cold against his neck, whispering of horrors he'd only glimpsed in the wraith's black eyes. The library was a cavern of forgotten knowledge, its towering shelves sagging under the weight of dusty tomes, their spines cracked like old bones, the air heavy with the musty scent of decay and wax. A chandelier hung above, its candles flickering, casting eerie shadows that danced across the walls, their movements almost alive, mocking his intrusion. Daniel moved silently, his boots whispering on the warped wooden floor, his fingers brushing leather-bound volumes inscribed with Latin and runes that stirred unease, their symbols echoing those in Clara's notebook, a language of power and peril. A locked glass case caught his eye, its surface etched with runes that glowed faintly, a sickly red pulse that matched the crypt door's menace, as if the convent's heart beat within. Inside rested a book, dark, ancient, its cover pulsing with a wrongness that made his stomach lurch, its leather seeming to writhe under the candlelight. His pulse quickened, the dagger's weight grounding him as he reached for the case, his fingers hovering, sensing a track woven into the glass itself. Footsteps echoed, sharp and deliberate, their rhythm unnatural, too fluid for human tread. Daniel froze, his flashlight flicking off, plunging him into shadow, his hand gripping the dagger as he ducked behind a shelf. Two nuns appeared at the library's entrance, their black habits trailing like liquid night, their veiled faces hidden, but their eyes glowed a sickly yellow, an inhuman light that pierced the gloom. "Leave," one hissed, her voice a rasp, breaking the vow of silence, sending a chill down his spine, her words a violation of the convent's sacred hush. Daniel's instincts screamed, his body coiling like a spring. "Not happening," he said, stepping out, dagger gleaming, its runes catching the candlelight, a defiant spark in the dark. The nuns attacked, their claws lengthening, slashing with inhuman speed, their movements a mockery of life, their yellow eyes burning with Clara's malice. Daniel dodged, heart racing, slashing one's arm, drawing a thick, black ichor that hissed as it hit the floor, its acrid stench burning his nostrils. "What the hell are you?" he growled, kicking the other back, her body slamming into a shelf, books tumbling in a cloud of dust, their pages fluttering like dying birds. They lunged again, claws raking his jacket, tearing leather, forcing him into a brutal dance, dodging, striking, parrying nails that slashed like knives, their strength unnatural, their snarls a chorus of hate. He stabbed the first nun, his dagger plunging deep, her body convulsing before dissolving into ash with a piercing scream that shook the chandelier, candles guttering. The second grabbed his throat, her grip iron, her claws digging into his skin, blood welling, but Daniel drove the dagger into her chest, her form crumbling, her wail echoing into silence, ash swirling like snow in the candlelight. Panting, sweat stinging his eyes, Daniel stumbled to the case, smashing it with his elbow, glass shattering like ice, the sound of violation in the library's hush. He grabbed the book, not the blood codex, but a journal inscribed with Veronica's name in elegant, looping script, its pages detailing the eternal blood pact, a ritual for immortality through blood sacrifice, with cryptic notes about binding Clara's wrath. Each word was a revelation, a map to the convent's heart, but the weight of it chilled him, its implications a shadow he couldn't outrun. A noise made him spin. Agnes, at the door, her veil lifted, eyes wide with horror, her face pale under the candlelight's flicker. "They are not human," she whispered, her voice trembling, her hands twisting her habit. "Clara controls them. Run." Daniel clutched the journal, his mind racing, the convent's secrets no longer ghostly tales but a tangible horror, its walls a prison for something far worse than specters, its silence a lie that hid Clara's hunger. Daniel followed Agnes through a maze of corridors, the journal a burning weight in his jacket, its secrets a puzzle that threatened to unravel him. The convent's stone walls seemed to close in, their shadows shifting under the flicker of sconces, each turn a descent deeper into its heart. They ducked into a hidden chapel, its altar cracked and draped in cobwebs, the air heavy with the scent of old wax and forgotten prayers, the stained glass windows depicting martyrs whose eyes bled crimson in the moonlight, their gazes a silent accusation. Agnes's breath hitched, her face pale under the faint glow of a single candle she lit with trembling hands, its flame wavering as if fearing the dark. "Those nuns," she whispered, her voice barely audible, her eyes darting to the shadows as if expecting Clara's wraith to emerge. "Clara's spirit twists them, makes them her puppets." Clara woke her. Daniel set the journal on the altar, stepping close, his voice low, urgent, cutting through the chapel's hush. "Tell me everything, Agnes. What did Clara do?" Agnes hesitated, her fingers twisting her habit, her body trembling as if the weight of her words could crush her. Then, in a rush, she spoke, her voice a fragile thread weaving a tale of horror. Clara had come seeking the blood codex, driven by academic whispers of eternal life, a scholar's hubris that led her to the crypt. She'd found the book, read its forbidden words, and broken a seal that bound Clara's vengeful spirit, a pact forged in 1650 when Clara was burned for witchcraft, her soul chained by the nun's vow of silence. "The vow keeps her caged," Agnes said, her voice cracking, tears glistening in her eyes. "It's why we don't speak, why we're bound. But it's failing, and Clara's reaching out, claiming us one by one, twisting our souls into hers." Her words were a confession, a plea, a warning, each syllable heavy with the weight of her own fear, her own rebellion against the convent's iron grip. Daniel's heart ached, her vulnerability a mirror to his own, his guilt for Lily's loss a shadow that matched her own. "Why help me?" he asked, softer now, his hand brushing hers on the altar, a spark that sent his pulse racing, her skin warm against his calloused fingers. Agnes's lips parted, her breath catching, her eyes searching his, their depths a storm of longing buried under years of repression. "Because you're not like them," she said, her voice a fragile confession, soft as a prayer in the chapel's hush. "You see me, not the veil, not the vow. You make me feel alive, for the first time since I came here." Her words hung in the air, a forbidden spark in the convent's icy grip, a fire kindled in a place of death. Daniel's heart raced, the world narrowing to her face, her eyes, the faint tremble of her lips, the scent of lavender clinging to her despite the chapel's musty air. He leaned closer, drawn by a pull stronger than reason, their breath mingling in the cold, his hand cupping her cheek, the warmth of her skin a shock against his rough palm. "Agnes," he murmured, his voice rough with a longing he couldn't name, a warmth he'd buried beneath years of grief and grit. She leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed, a tear tracing her cheek, but then pulled back, her face twisting with anguish. "This is forbidden," she whispered, her voice a plea, a warning. "Loving me could damn us both." Clara sees everything, feels everything. A bell tolled, its deep clang reverberating through the stone, shattering the fragile moment, shaking the chapel's walls as if summoning judgment. Agnes flinched, her face paling, her eyes darting to the shadows, her hands trembling as she clutched her habit. "The crypt, now," she said, her voice urgent, grabbing the candle, its flame wavering. "We have to find Clara before Veronica does." She led him out, her habit brushing the stone, but Daniel's skin burned where he touched her, a dangerous fire kindled in a place of ice, a vow that bound him to her, to Clara, to the truth, even as Clara's shadow loomed, ready to claim them both. The crypt door loomed at the corridor's end, a heavy oak slab carved with runes that glowed a sickly red, their pulse a heartbeat of malice that echoed the convent's dark heart. Daniel tested the handle, its iron unyielding, cold as death under his palm, the air thick with a stench of damp stone and something fouler, blood, or despair. Agnes stood beside him, a stolen key trembling in her hands, its rusted teeth glinting in the faint glow of his flashlight, her face pale, her eyes wide with a fear that mirrored his own. "I took it from Veronica's quarters," she whispered, her voice a fragile thread, laced with the dread of her betrayal. "She'll know soon, and she'll punish us." Daniel squeezed her shoulder, his touch steadying her trembling frame, his voice firm despite the dread coiling in his gut, a city-honed resolve clashing with the convent's primal terror. "We're in this together," he said, his eyes locking with hers, a vow that burned through the fog's chill. Agnes nodded, fitting the key into the lock, its scrape echoing like a scream in the corridor's hush, the door creaking open with a groan that seemed to wake the shadows, a violation of the convent's sacred silence. Beyond lay a staircase descending into darkness, its stone steps slick with moisture, the air growing colder with each step, reeking of decay, a sour tang that clung to the back of his throat. Daniel's flashlight flickered, its beam struggling against the oppressive gloom, casting jagged shadows that seemed to move, their forms twisting like the wraith's claws. Agnes clung to his arm, her breath shallow, her body tense, her knife, taken from the chapel's altar, clutched like a talisman, its blade a faint comfort in the crypt's menacing hush. The walls narrowed, runes pulsing like veins, their red glow a heartbeat that matched his own, a rhythm that whispered of Clara's hunger. At the crypt's base, a labyrinth of tombs sprawled, their stone faces etched with names long forgotten, their surfaces slick with moss and blood, chains dangling from the ceiling, swaying faintly as if stirred by a breath not their own. The altar from Clara's ill-fated night stood at the center, its surface stained black with centuries of sacrifice, its runes dark but etched deep, a testament to the blood pact's enduring power. Daniel's flashlight swept over it, his heart quickening, the journal's words, Veronica's notes on binding Clara, burning in his mind, a map to a truth he wasn't ready to face. A whisper slithered through the air, soft and chilling. "Lily." Daniel froze, his flashlight catching a flicker of movement, a figure in a tattered habit, black eyes locked on him, her veiled face a void. The wraith nun, Clara, stood at the crypt's edge, her presence a violation of reality, her laughter a blade that scraped his soul. Agnes gasped, clutching his arm tighter, her voice a hiss, "Don't look at her." Clara lunged, claws outstretched, her form blurring, and Daniel shoved Agnes behind him, slashing with the silver dagger, its runes flaring briefly. The blade passed through her, her laughter echoing like shattering glass, her form dissolving into mist, leaving only her voice, a taunt that burrowed into his mind. "She's toying with us," Daniel growled, his voice shaking despite his bravado, his heart pounding with rage and fear. Lily's name a wound reopened, a trap that tightened with each step. They searched the crypt, steps cautious, the air thick with menace, the shadows shifting as if alive. Near the altar, Daniel found a bloodstain, fresh and glistening, its edges wet, its scent coppery, sharp, a sign of Clara's presence, or her fate. His gut twisted, dread coiling like a serpent, but Agnes pointed to a hidden panel in the wall, barely ajar, its edges marked with frantic scratches, as if someone had clawed their way in, or out. "There," she whispered, her voice barely audible, her eyes wide with a fear that mirrored his own. "That's where she must be." Daniel's flashlight swept over the panel, his hand hovering, the wraith's laughter lingering, a promise of horrors waiting beyond, the crypt a crucible where truth and terror would collide. Daniel pried the hidden panel open with the silver dagger's blade, the wood splintering under his force, a sharp crack that echoed in the crypt's oppressive hush, the air thick with the stench of rotten blood. The panel revealed a narrow tunnel, its walls slick with moisture, its darkness a void that seemed to swallow his flashlight's beam, beckoning him into the convent's deepest secrets. He crawled through, the stone scraping his shoulders, Agnes close behind, her breath ragged in the confined space, a knife clutched tight, its blade glinting faintly in the gloom. The tunnel twisted like a serpent's spine, claustrophobic, its air heavy with decay, each movement stirring dust that stung their eyes, the silence broken only by their labored breaths and the distant drip of water, a rhythm that mocked their desperation. The tunnel opened into a chamber, a subterranean vault carved from the earth's bones, its walls etched with demonic frescoes, scenes of sacrifice, blood flowing into a chalice held by a nun with Clara's serene, terrifying face, her eyes seeming to watch them, alive with malice. The air was colder here, the scent of blood sharper, mingling with the musty tang of ancient stone, a place untouched by time or mercy. In the chamber's center stood a stone table, its surface stained black, crisscrossed with grooves that channeled blood to a basin below, a grotesque altar to Clara's pact. On the table lay Clara's dagger, its blade crusted with dried blood, the handle etched with her initials, a relic of her struggle, its presence a punch to Daniel's gut. "She was here," he said, his voice low, heavy with dread, picking up the dagger, its weight a grim confirmation, the blood flaking under his touch, a testament to Clara's fate. Agnes nodded, tears glinting in her eyes, her voice trembling as she stepped closer, her habit brushing the stone, her knife trembling in her hand. "Clara took her," she whispered, her words a confession, a plea. "To finish the pact. The blood codex demands blood, always blood, a price paid in souls." Her voice broke, her fear a mirror to his own, the chamber a crucible where their hopes would burn. A rumble shook the chamber, dust raining from the ceiling, the frescoes seeming to writhe, Clara's painted eyes glowing red, pulse that matched the rune's heartbeat. The wraith materialized, blocking the tunnel's exit, her tattered habit billowing, her black eyes glinting with hunger, her veiled face a void that drank the light. "You've come," she hissed, her voice Clara's, layered with centuries of malice, a sound that scraped their souls. Daniel's heart seized, his dagger raised, his voice a growl, "Where's Clara?" Clara's laughter was a blade, slicing through the air, the chamber quaking, torches flaring green, their flames unnatural, casting grotesque shadows that clawed at the walls. She lunged, claws slashing, and Daniel dove, shielding Agnes, his dagger sparking against her ethereal form, ichor spraying, its acrid stench burning his nostrils. Agnes cried out, stumbling, her knife grazing Clara's arm, drawing a hiss, but the wraith vanished, reappearing behind her, claws grazing her shoulder, blood welling, her scream piercing the chamber's hush. Daniel tackled Agnes clear, Clara's claws raking the air, her laughter pursuing them, a relentless echo that burrowed into their minds, a taunt that promised no escape. They scrambled back to the crypt, Daniel barring the panel with a rusted chain, his chest heaving, sweat mingling with blood, his wounds afire that threatened to consume him. Agnes clung to him, her sobs muffled against his chest, her blood staining his jacket, her voice raw, "She'll kill us, Daniel, she'll take us all." He held her tightly, his voice fierce despite the terror clawing at his heart. "Not while I'm here," he vowed, his eyes locked on hers, a promise sealed in blood. But Clara's dagger in his hand felt like a curse, its blooded blade a sign of failure, a warning that Clara's hunger was far from sated, the chamber's secrets a trap that tightened with each breath. Dawn's grey light barely pierced the fog cloaking St. Magdalene's courtyard, its cobblestones slick with dew, the air heavy with the convent's unspoken menace. Daniel emerged from the crypt, his arm around Agnes, her bloodied arm staining his torn jacket, her breath shallow but stubborn, a knife clutched like a talisman. Clara's dagger, crusted with blood, weighed heavy in his pocket, a grim relic of the hidden chamber's horrors, the wraith's laughter, Lily, the taunt that echoed in his mind, tying his sister's loss to this cursed place. The convent's silence was no longer a shield but a trap, its stones pulsing with Clara's hunger, a truth he couldn't outrun. They staggered toward the cloister garden, seeking refuge among its thorny roses, but Mother Veronica awaited at the arched doorway, her silhouette a judge at hell's gates, her black habit pristine, her eyes blazing with fury, a storm that crackled the air. "You've defiled our sanctity," she said, her voice a whip, each word laced with venom, her composure a mask that barely hid her rage. "The crypt is forbidden, yet you dare tread where angels fear, dragging this child into your folly." Her gaze flicked to Agnes, narrowing with betrayal, a mother's scorn for a wayward daughter. Daniel stepped forward, shielding Agnes, his jaw tight, his city instincts clashing with Veronica's otherworldly menace. "Clara's down there," he growled, his voice raw, his hand hovering near the dagger, its silver a cold comfort. "You're hiding her, and I want answers. What's the blood codex? What's Clara?" Veronica's smile was a predator's, cold and calculating, her eyes glinting with a knowledge that chilled his blood. "You know nothing, Mr. Cole," she said, her voice low, a threat wrapped in piety. "The vow binds us to silence, to keep her caged. Your meddling has weakened that seal, endangering us all, inviting a wrath you cannot fathom." She gestured, and two nuns emerged from the shadows, their veiled faces unnaturally still, their eyes glowing a sickly yellow, their presence a mockery of life, their claws hidden but implied in their predatory stance. Agnes clung to his arm, her voice a desperate whisper, "They are hers, Clara's puppets." Daniel drew the silver dagger, its runes catching the dawn's faint light, a defiant spark in the gloom. "Back off," he said, his voice steady despite the dread coiling in his gut, his body tensing for a fight he wasn't sure he could win. Veronica's laugh was a blade of ice, sharp and unyielding. "You cannot fight what you don't understand," she said, her gesture unleashing the nuns, their claws slashing, their movements inhumanly fast, their yellow eyes burning with Clara's malice. Daniel reacted on instinct, shoving Agnes behind him, parrying a claw with his dagger, drawing black ichor that hissed on the cobblestones, its stench acrid, burning his nostrils. The second nun raked his shoulder, pain searing through him, blood welling, but he roared, kicking her back, her body slamming into a stone pillar with a sickening crunch, ash swirling as she dissolved. Veronica raised a hand, and the nuns froze, their heads tilting like marionettes, their yellow eyes unblinking, a tableau of horror paused by her will. "Leave now," she said, her voice a command, her eyes locked on Daniel, a force pressing against his chest like a wall. "Or Agnes pays the price for your insolence." Before he could respond, the nuns seized Agnes, their grips iron, dragging her toward the convent's depths, her scream a knife that cut through the fog, a sound that tore at his heart. "No!" Daniel lunged, dagger raised, but Veronica's glare stopped him, a power that pinned him in place, her voice final, "Defy me further, and she dies." Daniel stood alone, blood dripping from his shoulder, the dagger trembling in his hand, Agnes's scream echoing in the courtyard's hush, a wound that bled deeper than his flesh. The convent silence mocked him, its walls closing in like a tomb, its secrets a noose tightening around his neck. He needed a plan, and fast, but the locket burned in his pocket, Lily's loss a shadow that merged with Agnes's peril, a vow to save them both, even if it meant facing Clara's wrath in the convent's cursed heart. Daniel stormed into his father's inn, fury and fear warring in his chest, his shoulder throbbing where the nun's claws had struck, Agnes's scream a relentless echo that drove him forward. The fog outside was a suffocating shroud, mirroring the chaos within him, the village's muddy streets silent save for the distant bark of a stray dog, a sound lost in the Cold War's oppressive hush. The inn was dim, its air thick with tobacco and despair, the walls a gallery of faded memories, photos of harvest festivals, Soviet posters, a village trapped in time. Zhuzha stood behind the bar, her sharp eyes reading him instantly, her hands pausing on a glass, her face set with a warrior's resolve, a woman who'd faced loss and lived to fight its shadow. "You're alive," she said, her voice flat but her gaze intense, a mother's grief glinting in her eyes, mirroring his own. "What happened up there?" Daniel slammed Clara's bloodied dagger on the counter, its blade glinting under the inn's weak lights, its crusted blood a grim testament to the crypt's horrors. "Found this in the crypt," he said, his voice rough, his eyes burning with purpose. "Clara's alive, but they've got Agnes. Veronica's running a freak show, nuns with claws, eyes like hellfire. What the hell's going on?" Zhuzha's face hardened, her fingers gripping the bar's edge, her voice low, weighted by years of unanswered questions. "The Wraith wants blood," she said, her words a map to the abyss, her eyes distant, haunted by her son's loss 15 years ago. "Always has." She pulled a hidden box from under the bar, revealing a stack of yellowed letters, accounts of missing villagers, their names scrawled in trembling hands, all tied to Saint Magdalene, a litany of grief that echoed Lily's absence. "My son was one," she said, her voice raw, her hands steady despite the pain. "I've hunted answers since, but the convent's walls are stone, its secrets blood." Daniel slid Lily's locket across the counter, its silver catching the light, its engraved initials a wound reopened. "This was in Clara's bag," he said, his voice rough, trembling with rage and confusion. "My sister's, from New York, 12 years ago." "How did it get here?" Zhuzha's eyes widened, her fingers brushing the locket as if it might burn, her voice soft, heavy with dread. "Someone's luring you," she said, her gaze locking with his, a mother's instinct merging with his own. "Veronica, maybe," or Clara herself. The wraith reaches through blood, through pain, weaving tracks across time. His mind reeled, the locket a tether to a past he couldn't escape, a thread tying Lily to Clara, to Agnes, to this cursed village. He leaned forward, his voice urgent, cutting through the inn's haze. "Help me get them out," he said, his eyes burning with resolve. "You know that place, what's the way in?" Julia studied him, her face a mask of grief and grit, then nodded, strapping a knife to her belt with a hunter's precision, her movements swift, practiced. "We'll need more than daggers," she said, pulling a shotgun from a locked cabinet, its barrel gleaming in the inn's dim light, a weapon out of place in this village of folklore and fear. She handed him a map, its lines crude but clear, drawn from memory, a smuggler's path used during the war, a tunnel beneath the convent leading to the crypt. "It's dangerous," she warned, her voice steady but her eyes dark with memory. "Clara's power is strongest below, where the blood flows." Daniel nodded, his resolve a blade, the locket and dagger anchoring him, Agnes's scream a vow he'd keep. "Let's move," he said, checking the dagger's runes, their faint glow a comfort against the fog's chill. As they stepped into the village's haze, the inn's door creaked shut, Kisvarda's street silent, the convent shadow a distant predator, its spires piercing the fog like a hunter's claws. Julia's voice was low, a final warning, "The wraith knows you're coming, American. She's been waiting." Daniel's heart pounded, the map a fragile hope, the locket a burning weight, his mind a storm of grief and rage. For Clara, for Agnes, for Lily, he'd tear the convent apart, stone by stone, or die in its cursed heart, the truth a shadow he'd face, no matter the cost. Dusk cloaked Kisvarda in a shroud of fog, its grey tendrils weaving through the forest, swallowing sound and light, a village suspended in the Cold War's eerie hush. Daniel and Julia crept toward the convent, armed and silent, the silver dagger in his pocket a cold anchor, the shotgun slung over Julia's shoulder a grim promise. The tunnel entrance, hidden beneath a collapsed chapel a mile from St. Magdalene, was a gaping maw of stone, overgrown with vines that seemed to writhe in the gloom, their thorns glinting like teeth. Julia pried open a rusted grate, a knife flashing in the fading light, its scrape echoing like a warning, the air turning cold and damp as they descended, the forest's fog a fading memory above. Daniel's flashlight cut through the dark, its beam revealing walls etched with faded runes, their lines pulsing faintly, a heartbeat of malice that grew stronger with each step, a reminder of Clara's power. Julia gripped her shotgun, her step steady but her eyes wary, her face set with a mother's resolve, her son's loss a fire that burned in her silence. "Stay close," she whispered, her voice low, cutting through the tunnel's hush, her breath visible in the chill. "The wraith knows we're coming, and she's strongest here, where the blood flows." Daniel nodded, his heart pounding, Agnes's scream echoing in his mind, her face a beacon in the dark, her courage a vow he'd keep. The tunnel twisted, narrowing until they crawled, the walls pressing like a grave, their slick stone scraping his shoulders, the air thick with the stench of rotten earth, each breath a struggle against the weight of the convent above. A low hum filled the air, unnatural, vibrating in his bones, a sound that wasn't sound but a feeling, a pulse of dread that tightened his chest. His flashlight flickered, shadows dancing like specters, their forms twisting into claws, into Lily's face, her eyes red, a vision that vanished when he blinked, leaving only darkness and doubt. "Keep moving," Julia hissed, her voice sharp, but a rumble stopped them, a grinding of stone, a hiss of air, the tunnel shaking as if rejecting their intrusion. Spikes shot from the walls, their tips glinting in the flashlight's beam, a trap sprung by the convent's will. Daniel dove, pulling Zhuzha down, the spikes snapping shut inches above them, their metal screeching, a sound that clawed at his nerves. "Jesus," he gasped, heart hammering, sweat stinging his eyes, his body pressed against the cold stone, Zhuzha's breath ragged beside him. "Old defenses," she said, her voice grim, her eyes glinting with resolve. "The convent protects its own, even now." They crawled past the spikes, the tunnel widening into a chamber lit by flickering torches, their flames green and unnatural, casting grotesque shadows that seemed to watch, their movements alive with Clara's malice. In the center stood a stone door, carved with Clara's rune, a chalice overflowing with blood, surrounded by writhing figures, their etched screams a warning. Daniel traced the lines, his fingers recoiling from their unnatural warmth, as if the stone bled beneath his touch. "This is it," Zhuzha said, her voice low, her shotgun ready. "The crypt's beyond, but so is she." Before he could push the door, the torches flared, green flames roaring, and Clara's wraith materialized, a tattered habit billowing, black eyes glinting with hunger, her veiled face a void. "You seek my vessel," she hissed, her voice layered with centuries of hate, a sound that scraped their souls. "Your blood will free me, as lilies could not." Daniel's heart seized, rage surging at his sister's name, the locket burning in his pocket, a trap sprung across time. "You took her," he growled, dagger raised, its runes flaring. "Why me?" Clara's laugh was a storm, the chamber quaking, shadows clawing at the walls. "Your pain, your guilt, it feeds me," she said, her claws slashing, forcing Daniel to dodge, his dagger sparking, ichor spraying. Zhuzha fired, the shotgun's blast deafening, but Clara dissolved, reappearing behind her, claws grazing her arm, blood welling, her scream echoing. Daniel slashed, forcing the wraith back, his strength faltering, his wounds afire, but the door loomed, a promise of answers, or doom. The underbelly of St. Magdalene Convent was a labyrinth of despair, its stone corridors slick with damp, lit by flickering sconces that cast grotesque shadows, their flames trembling as if fearing the darkness they fought. Daniel Cole moved through the tunnels, his silver dagger gleaming in the faint light, its runes a fragile shield against the malice pulsing in the walls. Zhuzha followed, her shotgun a grim sentinel, her wounded arm dripping blood, her face set with a mother's resolve, her son's loss a fire that burned through her pain. The convent's air was thick with the stench of blood and mold, its silence a predator's hush, broken only by their cautious steps and a distant drip of water, a rhythm that mocked their desperation to reach Agnes before Veronica's wrath claimed her. The tunnel from the collapsed chapel had led them here, a smuggler's path carved during wartime, now a passage to the convent's darkest secrets. Agnes's scream echoed in Daniel's mind, a knife that cut deeper than his wounds, a note, Clara's in the crypt, a vow he'd keep, even as Clara's laughter lingered, taunt-tying lilies lost to this cursed place. The locket burned in his pocket, a relic of his sister's absence, a trap woven across 12 years, its weight heavier than the dagger, its truth a shadow he couldn't outrun. They reached a row of iron doors, rusted and scarred, their barred windows revealing cells of cold stone, the penance cells where the convent's dissenters were broken. Daniel peered through one, his heart lurching, Agnes, chained to a wall, her habit torn, her face bruised but defiant, her eyes glinting with a fire that refused to fade. "Agnes," he hissed, prying the lock with his dagger, its blade scraping metal, a sound that echoed like a gunshot in the corridor's hush. She looked up, her eyes lighting with hope, tears tracing her bloodied cheeks. "Daniel," she gasped, her voice weak but fierce, a spark in the convent's icy grip. Zhuzha stood guard, her shotgun trained on the corridor, her breath steady despite the blood staining her sleeve. "Hurry," she whispered, her eyes scanning the shadows, her body tense, a warrior in a tomb of sin. Daniel broke the lock, the iron snapping, and pulled Agnes free, her chains clattering to the stone, her body trembling in his arms. Their embrace was fierce, a lifeline in the dark, her warmth a shock against his bloodied jacket, her scent, lavender and fear, a vow that bound them. Their lips met, a desperate kiss that burned through the cold, her taste a mix of salt and courage, a forbidden spark that defied Veronica's rule, Clara's curse. "I thought you," he whispered, his voice raw, his eyes locked on hers, a promise sealed in blood. Agnes clung to him, her voice trembling, "Clara's deeper, in the ritual chamber. Clara wants her blood to finish the pact." Her words were a map to the abyss, each syllable a stone paving their descent, her fear a mirror to his own. Juja's voice cut through, sharp, urgent, "We're not alone." Footsteps echoed, deliberate, inhuman, shadows shifting at the corridor's end, yellow eyes glinting in the gloom, nuns twisted by Clara's will, their claws hidden but implied in their predatory stance. Daniel helped Agnes stand, her strength returning, her knife, taken from the chapel, clutched like a talisman. Juja fired, the shotgun's blast deafening, felling a nun, ash exploding in the flickering light, but more came, their snarls a chorus of hate, their movements a mockery of life. Daniel slashed, his dagger sparking, ichor spraying, each strike fueled by rage for Lily, love for Agnes, guilt for Clara. Agnes fought beside him, a knife trembling but true, stabbing a nun's arm, blood welling, her scream a defiance that echoed in the stone halls. The fight was brutal, claws raking, blood mixing with ichor, the corridor a battlefield of light and shadow. A nun tackled Juja, claws slashing her shoulder, blood spraying, but she roared, firing point blank, ash erupting. Daniel pulled Agnes clear, his wounds afire, his strength faltering, but her hand in his was a vow, he wouldn't lose her. They fled deeper, the nuns' laughter pursuing, Clara's voice a hiss, "You cannot save them." The ritual chamber loomed, a promise of answers, or doom, its darkness a noose tightening around their hearts. The corridors beneath St. Magdalene twisted like veins, their walls etched with runes that pulsed a sickly red, a heartbeat of malice that grew stronger with each step, the air thick with the stench of blood and despair. Daniel led, his silver dagger a defiant spark, his wounds bleeding, each movement a battle against pain, Agnes's hand in his a lifeline, her bruised face pale but fierce, her knife clutched tight. Juja brought up the rear, her shotgun a grim sentinel, her bloodied arm trembling but her resolve iron, her son's loss a fire that burned through her pain. The convent's underbelly was a labyrinth designed to trap the unwary, its silence a predator's hush, broken by their ragged breaths and the distant groan of stone, a warning of its collapsing heart. Agnes's words, Clara's in the ritual chamber, echoed in Daniel's mind, a vow that drove him forward, the locket burning, Lily's loss a shadow merging with Clara's fate, Clara's laughter a taunt that tightened its grip. The map from Juja, now tattered, guided them to a massive stone door, its surface carved with Clara's rune, a chalice overflowing with blood, surrounded by writhing figures, their etched screams a testament to centuries of sacrifice. Daniel traced the lines, his fingers recoiling from their unnatural warmth, as if the stone bled beneath his touch, a pulse that matched the convent's dark heart. "This is it," Juja said, her voice low, her shotgun ready, her eyes glinting with a mother's resolve, her blood dripping onto the stone, a silent offering. Agnes's hand brushed Daniel's arm, her touch a fleeting anchor, her voice trembling, "Be careful, Daniel. Clara's strongest here, where the blood flows. Her eyes searched his, a spark of love in their depths, a forbidden flame that burned through the convent's cold. He nodded, his heart torn between duty and the pull of her gaze, his voice steady despite the dread coiling in his gut. Together, he said, a vow sealed in the crypt's hush. Daniel and Julia pushed against the door, its weight resisting, stone grinding against stone, a groan that echoed like a dying breath, the air beyond thick with the stench of blood, sharper here, mingled with the sour tang of ancient rites. The door opened, revealing a cavernous chamber lit by green flame torches, their light casting grotesque shadows that seemed to writhe, alive with Clara's malice. At the chamber's heart stood an altar, larger than the crypt's, its surface stained black with blood, grooves channeling it to a basin below, a grotesque throne for the blood codex. On the altar lay Clara Harris, bound with chains, her face pale but alive, her chest rising faintly, her eyes closed, her body a vessel for Clara's pact. Beside her rested the codex, its cover pulsing like a heart, its open pages scrawled in crimson, a ritual that whispered of eternity and death. Before Daniel could move, Clara's wraith materialized, her tattered habit billowing, black eyes glinting with hunger, her veiled face a void that drank the light. "You've come," she hissed, her voice layered with centuries of malice, a sound that scraped their souls. "Your blood will free me, as lilies could not." Daniel's heart seized, rage surging at his sister's name, the locket a burning weight, a trap sprung across time. "You took her," he growled, dagger raised, its runes flaring. "Why me?" Clara's laugh was a storm, the chamber quaking, torches flaring green, shadows clawing at the walls. "Your pain, your guilt, it feeds me," she said, her claws hovering over Clara's throat, thin line of blood welling, a promise of sacrifice. Daniel froze, his mind racing, Agnes's hand in his avow, Hughes's shotgun a grim sentinel. "The codex, destroy it," Agnes whispered, her voice trembling, her eyes locked on his, a spark of defiance in the dark. But Clara's claws tightened, her laughter swelling, the chamber a crucible where blood would seal their fate, a trap that promised no escape. The alcove beneath St. Magdalene Convent was a fleeting sanctuary, its stone walls slick with damp, lit by a single torch that sputtered in the stale air, its flame a frail defiance against the darkness pressing in. Daniel knelt beside Agnes, his hands bloodied but steady as he bandaged her wounds, her torn habit revealing bruises and claw marks from the penance cell, her face pale but fierce, a spark of defiance that burned through the convent's suffocating dread. Julia stood guard at the alcove's mouth, her shotgun cocked, her bloodied arm dripping, her weathered face scanning the shadows, a warrior forged by loss. Clara lay against the wall, chains broken but her body weak, her eyes fluttering open, brown but shadowed, her rosary dark, her breath a fragile thread in the cold. The ritual chamber's horrors lingered, Clara's claws a memory that burned in Daniel's mind, her taunt, "Your blood will free me," a venomous promise tying Lily's loss to Clara's peril, to Agnes's pain. The blood codex pulsed in his thoughts, its destruction their only hope, but its power clung to the convent's stones, a curse that refused to die. The locket burned in his pocket, a relic of his sister's absence, a trap that had drawn him here, his guilt Clara's fuel. "Clara wants me," he said, his voice rough, tying off Agnes's bandage, his eyes locked on hers, a vow in their depths. "Why? What's her endgame?" Agnes winced, her hand finding his, a touch warm against his calloused fingers, a spark that steadied his racing heart. "The codex isn't just a book," she whispered, her voice trembling, her eyes glistening with tears. "It's her soul, her anchor. Clara broke the seal, and Clara needs blood, yours, Clara's, mine, to walk the earth again, to finish the pact. Her words were a map to the abyss, each syllable a stone paving their descent, her fear a mirror to his own, her love a flame that burned through the convent's cold. Juja's voice cut through, low and urgent, her shotgun shifting. "Veronica's coming," she said, her eyes on the corridor, her blood dripping onto the stone, a silent offering. "She's Clara's vessel, has been for years. The ritual chamber's the key, Clara's there, with the codex." Daniel nodded, his jaw tight, but his gaze lingered on Agnes, her bruised face a beacon, her courage a vow he'd keep. "Can you walk?" he asked, his voice soft, his hand steadying her. She nodded, standing with effort, her knife clutched, her eyes fierce despite her wounds. "For you," she said, her voice a confession, a spark in the dark. Footsteps echoed, sharp and inhuman, from the corridor beyond, yellow eyes glinting in the gloom, nuns twisted by Clara's will, their claws a promise of blood. Daniel stood, dagger raised, its runes flaring, his wounds afire, but his resolve a blade. "Stay close," he said, his voice fierce, his eyes locked on Agnes, a vow sealed in blood. Juja led them toward the ritual chamber, the map their guide, but the convent trembled, a rumble like a beast waking, Clara's laughter a whisper that tightened its grip, a promise that the fight for Clara, and their souls, was only beginning. The ritual chamber beneath St. Magdalene was a crucible of horror, its green-flamed torches casting shadows that writhed like demons, the air thick with the stench of blood, sharp and coppery, mingled with the sour tang of ancient rites. Daniel stood at the altar's edge, his silver dagger gleaming, his wounds bleeding, each breath a knife in his chest, Agnes beside him, her knife trembling, her bruised face fierce, her love a beacon in the dark. Juja guarded Clara, her shotgun ready, her bloodied arm dripping, her eyes scanning the shadows, a mother's resolve burning through her pain. Clara lay bound on the altar, her pulse faint, her blood seeping from Clara's claw marks, her rosary dark, a silent plea in her closed eyes. Clara's wraith hovered above, her black eyes glinting, claws dripping with Clara's blood, her laughter a venom that seeped into their bones, a taunt that twisted Daniel's heart. "Your blood will free me, as Lily's could not." The locket burned, a trap sprung across time, Lily's loss a wound reopened, a vow to end Clara's curse. "You took her," Daniel growled, dagger raised, its runes flaring, his rage a fire that burned through fear. "Why me?" Clara's voice was a hiss, layered with centuries of hate. "Your pain feeds me. Your guilt binds me." Agnes stepped forward, her knife raised, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes, a defiance that echoed Clara's courage. "Let her go, Clara," she said, her words a challenge, her body trembling but unyielding. "Take me instead." Daniel grabbed her arm, pulling her back, his voice raw. "No, Agnes. You're not dying here." Her gaze was fierce, a mirror to his own, her hand squeezing his, a vow unspoken. "If we don't stop her, no one will," she said, her voice a confession, a spark in the dark. Juja cocked her shotgun, aiming at Clara, her voice hard. "Enough games. Step away from the girl." Clara's laugh swelled, the chamber shaking, the altar's runes blazing red, a pulse that matched their racing hearts. Shadows detached from the walls, nuns, their eyes yellow, claws dripping ichor, their movements a mockery of life, their snarls a chorus of hate. "You brought weapons," Clara said, amused, her claws tightening on Clara's throat, blood welling. "But this is my domain." The nuns attacked, a swarm of claws and snarls, their yellow eyes burning with Clara's malice. Daniel slashed, his dagger sparking, ichor spraying, each strike fueled by rage for Lily, love for Agnes, guilt for Clara. Zsuzsa fired, her blasts fell into ash exploding, but a nun raked her arm, blood welling, her scream echoing. Agnes fought beside Daniel, her knife flashing, stabbing a nun's arm, ichor spraying, her movements clumsy but fierce, her defiance a spark in the gloom. Clara's eyes fluttered open, her voice a whisper, "Burn it," her gaze on the codex, its pages pulsing, a heart of darkness. Clara's claws slashed, striking Daniel's chest, pain blinding him, blood soaking his jacket, but he swung his dagger, forcing her back, his strength faltering. Agnes screamed his name, tackling a nun lunging for him, her knife plunging deep, ash erupting. Zsuzsa pulled Clara's chains free, dragging her to the chamber's edge, but Clara's laugh was unrelenting, the chamber a battlefield of light and shadow. "We need to burn it," Daniel gasped, clutching his wound, his eyes on the codex, its power a siren call, trap that promised eternity and death. Blood dripped from Daniel's chest, a crimson river staining the ritual chamber's stone, each step toward the altar a battle against pain, the blood codex's siren call whispering in his mind, promising power, vengeance, life eternal. The book's pages fluttered, their crimson script glowing, a language older than stone, a pact that bound Clara's soul to the convent's heart. Clara's wraith hovered above, her black eyes glinting, claws dripping with his blood, her laughter a venom that twisted his thoughts. "You feel it," she hissed, her voice slithering into his mind, a serpent's tongue. "The codex offers eternity. Take it, and Lily lives." Daniel's vision blurred, Lily's face flashing, her smile, her scream, her absence, a wound 12 years deep, a trap that Clara had woven to break him. He shook his head, gripping the silver dagger, its runes grounding him, its silver a cold anchor against the codex's call. "You're a liar," he snarled, lunging for the altar, his dagger raised, but Clara's claws slashed, forcing him back, pain exploding in his arm, blood welling, his strength faltering. Agnes ducked between them, her knife deflecting a claw, her arm bleeding anew, her scream a defiance that echoed in the chamber's hush. "Daniel, now," she cried, her voice a lifeline, her eyes locked on his, a spark of love that burned through fear. Zsuzsa fired her shotgun, keeping the possessed nuns at bay, their yellow eyes glinting, claws slashing, ash exploding with each blast, but her arm trembled, blood pooling at her feet, her resolve a mother's fire burning through pain. Clara, half-conscious, mumbled, "Burn it, please," her voice weak, her eyes on the codex, its pages pulsing, a heart of darkness that called to their blood. Clara's wraith descended, her form swelling, the chamber quaking, stones cracking, her laughter a storm that drowned their chants, their hopes. Daniel reached the codex, his hand seizing its cover, its heat searing his palms, a pulse that matched his racing heart, a power that whispered of eternity, of Lily's return, of Agnes's safety. Clara's claws slashed his back, pain blinding, but he held firm, his dagger plunging into the book, its blade sparking, pages tearing, crimson ink bleeding like blood. The codex screamed, a sound that shattered torches, green flames guttering, but Clara's wraith roared, her claws slashing Agnes, her body falling, blood pooling, her scream piercing his heart. Zsuzsa dragged Clara clear, shouting, "Out!" her shotgun blasting a path, but the chamber shook, stones raining, the codex's fire spreading, a blaze that consumed its pages, its power. Daniel lifted Agnes, her pulse faint, his heart breaking, his dagger raised, Clara's wraith fading, her scream a blade that cracked stone, but her laughter lingered, a promise of return. They fled, the chamber collapsing, flames licking their heels, the convent's heart afire, but Clara's curse a shadow that clung to their blood, their souls. The ritual chamber beneath St. Magdalene Convent roared with the fury of a dying beast, its green flame torches guttering as the blood codex burned, its crimson pages curling into ash, a scream of ancient malice that shook the stone walls. Daniel Cole clutched Sister Agnes, her blood soaking his torn jacket, her pulse faint beneath his fingers, her bruised face pale but defiant, her knife fallen, a sacrifice a vow that burned in his heart. Clara Harris, freed from the altar's chains, slumped against Julia, the innkeeper's shotgun still gripped, her bloodied arm trembling, her weathered face a mask of grit despite the wounds that bled her strength. The chamber's altar cracked, its runes fading, a heart of darkness breaking, but Clara's wraith lingered, her black eyes glinting, her laughter a venomous hiss that slithered through the flames. You've only delayed me. Daniel's chest was a furnace of pain, slashes weeping blood, his vision blurring, but Agnes's touch, her hand weak against his arm, kept him anchored, her love a flame that burned through the convent's icy grip. The locket in his pocket, Lily's relic, burned like a coal, a trap sprung 12 years ago, Clara's curse tying his sister's loss to Clara's peril, to Agnes's blood, to his own guilt. We need to get out, he gasped, lifting Agnes, her weight a vow he'd carry to his grave, his silver dagger clutched, its runes dark but steady, a shield against the wraith's wrath. Julia dragged Clara, her shotgun empty, her knife now drawn, its blade glinting in the firelight, her voice sharp, move, now. The chamber shook, stones raining from the ceiling, dust choking the air, the codex's fire spreading, a blaze that consumed its pages, its power, a pyre for Clara's soul, or so they hoped. Clara's wraith surged, her claws slashing, a shadow in the flames, her voice a roar, your blood is mine. Daniel slashed, his dagger sparking, ichor spraying, but pain blinded him, his strength faltering, his wounds a fire that threatened to consume him. Agnes stirred, her voice a whisper, the chalice, it's her anchor. Her eyes, weak but fierce, flicked to a basin beneath the altar, a stone vessel filled with dark, viscous blood, pulsing with Clara's malice, a relic of the eternal blood pact. Daniel's heart seized, the journal's words, Veronica's notes on binding Clara, flashing in his mind, a truth he hadn't seen, the codex was a key, but the chalice was her heart. He staggered to it, dagger raised, but Clara's claws slashed his back, pain exploding, his vision swimming, blood pooling at his feet. Julia fired her last shell, the blast scattering shadows, buying time, but a nun, twisted by Clara, tackled her, claws raking her chest, blood spraying, her scream echoing. Clara, trembling, grabbed a torch, its green flame flaring, and thrust it at the chalice, the blood hissing, steam rising, Clara's scream a blade that cracked stone. No, the wraith roared, her form swelling, claws slashing Clara, her body falling, blood welling, her rosary dark, her eyes wide with terror. Daniel plunged his dagger into the chalice, the stone shattering, blood exploding, flames erupting, Clara's scream a storm that shook the chamber, a shadow dissolving, but the ceiling groaned, stones falling, a death trap closing in. He lifted Agnes, her pulse fading, Clara's body in Julia's arms, their escape a desperate race against collapse, the convent's heart a pyre, Clara's laughter a fading echo, a promise that her curse lived on, in their blood, their pain, their souls. The Hungarian forest loomed like a cathedral of shadows, its fog-drenched pines swallowing the dawn's blood-red light, their branches clawing at the sky, a silent jury for the damned. Daniel staggered through the undergrowth, Agnes in his arms, her blood seeping into his jacket, her pulse a fragile thread, her face pale, the ghost of the woman who defied Clara's wrath. Zsuzsa followed, dragging Clara, her knife clutched, her shotgun lost in the chamber's collapse, her wounded leg bleeding, her face grim, a warrior forged by loss, her son's absence a fire that burned through her pain. The convent spires, silhouetted against the sky, watched like a predator licking its wounds, the blood codex's fire a memory that burned in their minds, Clara's laughter a faint hiss, a promise that the wraith was not defeated. Daniel's wounds were a furnace, slashes across his chest and back weeping blood, each step a battle against collapse, but Agnes's touch, her hand limp against his arm, kept him moving, her love a vow he'd die to keep. The locket burned, Lily's relic, a trap that had drawn him to kiss father, his guilt Clara's fuel, a shadow tying his past to Clara's peril, to Agnes's blood. "We need a doctor," he rasped, his voice raw, his eyes scanning the fog for refuge, the forest a maze of roots and thorns, its silence a predator's hush. Clara stirred, her voice trembling, "She's still here, in me." Her eyes flickered red, her fingers twitching, tracing runes in the air, a shadow passing through her gaze, Clara's grip lingering despite the codex's destruction. Zsuzsa's voice was sharp, "She's tethered to the chalice's blood, to us." Her knife glinted, her eyes on Clara, a mother's resolve tempered by suspicion, her son's loss a wound that mirrored Daniel's own. A rustle broke the silence, branches snapping, footsteps swift, synchronized, inhuman. Daniel set Agnes down, dagger raised, its runes dark, his heart pounding. "Stay behind me," he growled, his body coiling, wounds screaming. Shadows surged from the fog, nuns, their habits tattered, yellow eyes glinting, claws dripping ichor, their snarls a chorus of Clara's malice. "Her will endures," one hissed, breaking the vow, her voice a rasp that chilled his blood. Daniel fought, dagger slashing, ichor spraying, each strike a cry for Agnes, for Lily, for Clara. Zsuzsa swung her knife, stabbing a nun's arm, ash erupting, but claws raked her leg, blood welling, her scream echoing. Agnes, weak, grabbed the branch, swinging it, her defiance a spark in the gloom, keeping a nun at bay. Clara curled into a ball, screaming, "She's in my head," her rosary dark, her body trembling, Clara's whispers clawing her soul. The nuns swarmed, relentless, their laughter Clara's, a tide of hate. Daniel's strength faltered, blood pooling, but Zsuzsa slashed a path, shouting, "Run!" They fled, Daniel carrying Agnes, Zsuzsa dragging Clara, the forest a gauntlet of thorns, the nuns pursuing, their yellow eyes lanterns in the fog, Clara's curse a shadow that clung, a vow to claim them all. The forest spat them into the ruins of an abandoned chapel, its stone walls crumbling, its stained glass windows shattered into jagged mosaics of martyred saints, their crimson eyes bleeding in the dawn's faint glow. Daniel kicked open the rotted door, wood splintering, and staggered inside, laying Agnes on a cracked altar, her pulse faint, her blood staining the stone, her face a ghost of defiance. Zsuzsa dragged Clara, collapsing against a pew, her knife clutched, her leg bleeding, her face grim, a warrior battered but unbowed. The chapel's air was thick with dust and a faint tang of incense, a sanctuary defiled by time and Clara's curse, its silence a fragile shield against the forest's menace. Daniel knelt beside Agnes, cleaning her wounds with trembling hands, his heart a war of love and fear, a lavender scent a memory that burned through his grief. "You're gonna make it," he said, his voice fierce, though her pulse was a fading drum, her eyes fluttering open, weak but warm. "Daniel," she murmured, her hand finding his, a spark in the cold. "If I don't stop her." Her words were a knife, twisting in his chest, her courage a vow he'd keep. He leaned close, their lips meeting in a desperate kiss, a forbidden flame that burned through the chapel's gloom, a taste a mix of blood and hope. Clara slumped against a wall, her eyes darting, her fingers twitching. "She's in my head," she whispered, her voice trembling, her rosary dark, its beads cracked. Clara won't stop. Julia's gaze hardened, her knife steady, the codex burned, but her spirit's tethered to Veronica, or you. Her words were a warning, her eyes on Clara, a mother's suspicion tempered by loss, her son's absence a mirror to Daniel's grief for Lily. The chapel's door rattled, claws scraping wood, Clara's laughter swelling, a storm that drowned their whispers. "They are here," Julia growled, standing, knife raised, her blood dripping onto the stone, a silent offering. Daniel stood beside Agnes, dagger gleaming, his wounds afire, his resolve ablaze. "We hold them," he said, his eyes locked on hers, a vow sealed in blood. The door splintered, nuns surging in, yellow eyes glinting, claws slashing, their snarls a chorus of Clara's malice. Daniel fought, dagger sparking, ichor spraying, each strike a cry for Agnes, for Lily, for Clara. Julia slashed, her knife plunging, ash erupting, but a nun tackled her, claws raking her chest, blood welling. Agnes swung a candelabrum, cracking a nun's skull, her defiance a spark in the gloom. Clara curled tighter, but her rosary flickered, a faint glow, her voice chanting, pushing the shadows back. The chapel burned, flames licking cues from a fallen torch, a pyre for their hopes, Clara's laughter a tide that threatened to drown them. The forest gave way to a rushing river, its black waters churning under the dawn's eerie glow, its banks slick with mud, a barrier between life and the convent's curse. Daniel set Agnes down, his chest heaving, wounds a furnace that threatened collapse, her pulse faint, her face pale, a vow he'd died to keep. Julia laid Clara beside her, her knife clutched, her leg bleeding, her face grim, a warrior battered by loss, her son's absence a fire that burned through pain. Clara's eyes flickered red, her fingers scratching wounds in the mud. "She's stronger," she whispered, her voice trembling, Clara's whispers clawing her soul. Daniel bandaged Agnes's arm, his hands trembling, her lavender scent a memory that burned through grief, her touch a lifeline. "You're not fighting," he said, his voice raw, his eyes locked on hers, a vow sealed in blood. She shook her head, her hand squeezing his. "I fight with you," she whispered, her voice a confession, a spark in the cold. Their lips brushed, a forbidden kiss that burned through the river's chill, her courage a flame that steadied his heart. Julia scanned the forest, her knife ready. "We need the village priest, Laszlo. He knows rights to bind Clara." Her voice was steady, her eyes on Clara, suspicion tempered by resolve, her blood dripping onto the mud, a silent offering. A howl broke the silence, not wolves, but nuns, their yellow eyes glinting through the trees, Clara's laughter a tide of hate. Daniel stood, dagger raised, his wounds screaming. "They are tracking us," he growled, his body coiling. The river's bridge, narrow and rotted, was their only path, its planks creaking under their weight, the water roaring below, or more ready to swallow them. Daniel led, half carrying Agnes, Julia dragging Clara, the bridge swaying, wood splintering. A nun leaped, landing on the planks, claws slashing, the bridge buckling. Daniel slashed, ichor spraying, but claws raked his arm, pain exploding. Agnes stabbed, her knife plunging, ash erupting, her scream echoing. Julia swung her knife, felling another, but the bridge collapsed, plunging them into the icy water, Clara's laughter a shadow that clung, a vow to claim their blood. The river's current was a beast, dragging Daniel under, its icy grip stealing his breath, his wounds afire doused by cold. He clung to Agnes, her body limp, her face pale against the black water, her pulse a vow he'd keep. His arms burned, blood clouding the river, but he kicked upward, breaking the surface with a gasp, the dawn's blood-red light a cruel mockery of hope. Zsuzsa surfaced nearby, hauling Clara, her eyes wide, her body thrashing, red light flickering in her gaze, Clara's grip tightening despite the codex's fire, the chalice's ruin. Daniel swam to the bank, pulling Agnes onto the mud, his hands shaking as he checked her pulse, faint, but there, a spark in the cold. "Stay with me," he whispered, his voice breaking, pressing his lips to her forehead, her skin cold but alive, her lavender scent a memory that burned through grief. Zsuzsa dragged Clara ashore, pinning her as she convulsed, red light flaring, Clara's voice snarling through her, "You'll burn." Clara's hands clawed her face, blood welling, her scream a plea, "She's fighting me." Zsuzsa's knife hovered, her eyes hard, "We need Laszlo, now." The forest echoed with nun snarls, closer, relentless, their yellow eyes lanterns in the fog. Daniel lifted Agnes, his strength waning, her weight a vow, her pulse a fire that burned through pain. Zsuzsa led, knife raised, Clara stumbling, muttering Latin, Clara's tongue twisting her words, her rosary dark, its beads cracked. The village was a mile away, through dense woods, but the nuns were faster, their claws a promise of blood, Clara's laughter a tide that threatened to drown them. A nun lunged, claws slashing, and Daniel dodged, shielding Agnes, his dagger plunging, ash exploding, ichor spraying. Zsuzsa stabbed another, her knife steady, but claws raked her arm, blood welling, her scream echoing. Clara's rosary flickered, her voice chanting, pushing a nun back, ash swirling, but her eyes flared red, her body trembling, Clara's grip tightening. Agnes stirred, her hand gripping Daniel's, her voice weak, "Save her," a plea that broke his heart, her courage a vow he'd keep. They ran, the river's roar fading, the forest a gauntlet of thorns, the nuns pursuing, Clara's laughter a shadow that clung, a promise that their blood would seal her pact, the village their only hope, a fragile light in a world drowning in darkness. His father's church stood as a squat stone sentinel, its steeple piercing the fog like a weary soldier's spear, its weathered doors scarred by time and the village's unspoken fears. Daniel Cole burst through, carrying Sister Agnes, her pulse a faint whisper against his blooded hands, her face pale, her lavender scent a fading memory beneath the copper tang of her wounds. Zsuzsa followed, dragging Clara Harris, whose body trembled, eyes flickering red, Clara's voice snarling through her, "You cannot bind me." The church's interior was a dim haven, lit by rows of flickering candles, their wax dripping like tears onto the stone floor, the air heavy with incense and a weight of desperate prayers, a fragile shield against the convent's curse. Father Laszlo, in his 50s, stood at the altar, disheveled, his cassock stained with whiskey, his eyes wide with fear, clutching a rosary that trembled in his gnarled hands. His face, lined by years of guilt and doubt, paled as Zsuzsa shoved Clara forward, a knife still drawn, her blooded leg leaving a trail on the floor. "Laszlo," she growled, her voice cutting through the church's hush, "Clara's in her. To your rights, now." Laszlo's gaze darted between them, his voice a rasp, "Zsuzsa, what have you brought into God's house?" But Daniel's voice, raw with urgency, silenced him. "She's dying," he said, laying Agnes on a pew, her blood staining the wood, her pulse fading like a candle in the wind. "Help them, or I'll drag you to hell myself." Laszlo nodded, his hands shaking as he grabbed a leather-bound book of exorcisms, its pages yellowed, edges curling like autumn leaves, its Latin scripture fading hope against Clara's wrath. He began chanting, his voice hoarse but steady, the words rolling like thunder, a shield woven from faith and fear. Clara arrived, bound to a chair with ropes scavenged from the sacristy, her body arching, red light flaring in her eyes, Clara's voice snarling, "Thor, my pact is eternal." The candles guttered, their flames bending as if fleeing her presence, the church's walls trembling, dust raining from the rafters. Daniel knelt beside Agnes, his hands steadying her, his heart a storm of love and dread, a faint pulse a vow he'd keep. Her eyes fluttered open, weak but fierce, her voice a whisper, "Save Clara, don't let Clara win." Her words were a knife, twisting in his chest, her courage a flame that burned through his grief for Lily, his guilt for Clara, his fear for her. He kissed her forehead, his lips trembling, her skin cold but alive, a promise sealed in blood, "I won't lose you," he murmured, his voice breaking, the locket burning, a relic of his sister's loss, a trap that bound him to Clara's curse. A crash shattered the chant, nuns, their yellow eyes glinting, claws slashing, bursting through a stained glass window, shards raining like blood. Julia swung her knife, stabbing one, ash erupting, but claws raked her arm, blood welling, her scream echoing. Daniel stood, dagger raised, its runes flaring, slashing a nun, ichor spraying, his wounds afire, his resolve ablade. Laszlo's chant faltered, his rosary pressed to Clara's forehead, holy water hissing on her skin, steam rising, Clara's scream a blade that cracked stone. Clara's body convulsed, red light fading, her voice breaking through, "Help me," her eyes brown, tears streaming, a plea that tore at Daniel's heart. The nuns swarmed, relentless, their laughter Clara's, a tide of hate. Daniel fought, dagger sparking, each strike a cry for Agnes, for Lily, for Clara, his strength faltering, blood pooling at his feet. Julia tackled a nun, her knife plunging, ash exploding, but claws slashed her chest, blood spraying, her scream a mother's defiance. Clara's rosary flared, her voice joining Laszlo's, pushing the shadows back, but Clara's grip tightened, the church a crucible where faith and blood would burn, a sanctuary defiled by the wraith's wrath. His father's church shuddered under Clara's wrath, its stone walls trembling as if rejecting the evil within, candlelight flickering like a soul on the brink of extinction. Clara writhed in her ropes, her body arching against the chair, eyes blazing red, Clara's voice snarling through her, "Your rights are dust." Father Laszlo's Latin chant faltered, his whiskey-soaked hands trembling, clutching his exorcism book, its pages yellowed, a fragile shield against the wraith's malice. Daniel stood over Agnes, her pulse a fading whisper, her blood staining the pew, her face pale, her courage a vow that burned in his heart. Julia guarded the door, her knife blooded, her wounds dripping, her face grim, a warrior forged by loss, her son's absence a fire that burned through pain. Daniel's dagger gleamed, its runes dark, his wounds a furnace, blood seeping through his torn jacket, but his resolve was a blade, Agnes's whispered plea, "Don't let Clara win," a fire that steadied his hand. Clara's screams tore through the church, her voice shifting, hers, then Clara's, a chorus of torment, her body convulsing, red light cracking the chair's wood. "She's fighting," Julia growled, slashing a nun bursting through a window, ash erupting, her arm bleeding, her scream echoing. Laszlo resumed chanting, louder, splashing holy water, droplets hissing on Clara's skin, steam rising, Clara's scream shaking the rafters, dust raining like ash. The church's windows shattered, nuns swarming, their yellow eyes glinting, claws slashing, a tide of Clara's malice. Daniel fought, dagger sparking, ichor spraying, each strike a cry for Agnes, for Lily, for Clara, his strength faltering, blood pooling. Agnes stirred, her hand reaching for him, her voice weak, keep going, her eyes fierce, a spark in the gloom. He slashed a nun, ash erupting, but claws raked his arm, pain exploding, his vision blurring, his heart pounding with rage and love. Laszlo's chant peaked, his rosary pressed to Clara's forehead, her body convulsing, red light fading, her voice breaking through. She's gone, her eyes brown, tears streaming, a plea answered. But Zsuzsa's voice was grim, not for long. Veronica's out there, her anchor. The church doors burst open, Veronica striding in, her black habit billowing, eyes glowing yellow, her smile a serpent's, Clara's voice hissing, "You delayed me." Nuns poured in, claws glinting, and Daniel stood, dagger raised, Agnes's hand in his, a vow to face the wraith's wrath, the church a crucible where blood would seal their fate. Veronica's presence turned Kisfather's church into a battlefield, her yellow eyes blazing with Clara's malice, her nuns a swarm of claws and ichor, their laughter a chorus of hate that drowned the candlelight's flicker. Daniel stood between Agnes and the onslaught, his silver dagger raised, blood dripping from his wounds, his body a furnace of pain, his resolve a blade forged in love and rage. Clara, freed but weak, huddled behind Zsuzsa, whose knife slashed a nun, ash erupting, her bloodied arm trembling, her face grim, a warrior battered by loss. Laszlo clutched his rosary, his chants a desperate shield, but Veronica's laugh was a storm, her voice Clara's, "You burned my codex, but my pact is eternal." Daniel's heart pounded, Agnes's pulse a vow in his hand, her face pale but fierce, her knife clutched, her love a beacon in the chaos. "Stay back," he growled, slashing a nun, ichor spraying, his wounds screaming, his strength faltering. Veronica's eyes locked on him, a smile a predator's, "Your blood, Daniel, seals it," she said, her voice a hiss, her hand raised, red light flaring, the church quaking, pews splintering, dust raining like ash. Nuns swarmed, claws slashing, Daniel's dagger a blur, each strike a cry for Agnes, for Lily, for Clara. Zsuzsa fought beside him, her knife plunging, ash erupting, but claws raked her shoulder, blood spraying, her scream echoing. Agnes stood, her knife flashing, stabbing a nun's arm, ichor welling, her defiance a spark in the gloom, her eyes locked on Daniel, a vow unspoken. Clara's rosary flickered, her voice chanting, pushing shadows back, but Clara's grip tightened, red light flaring in her eyes, a battle within her soul. Veronica advanced, her hands glowing red, the air crackling, her voice a command, "Kneel, and I'll spare the nun." Daniel's rage surged, his dagger slashing, but her claws met his, sparking, pain exploding in his chest, blood welling. Agnes tackled a nun lunging for him, her knife plunging, ash erupting, her scream a defiance that burned through fear. Laszlo threw holy water, droplets hissing on Veronica's skin, her scream shaking the walls, but she swatted him aside, his body crashing into the altar, blood trickling from his brow. The church's ceiling groaned, stones falling, a death trap closing in. Daniel pulled Agnes clear, their bodies pressed, her heartbeat a vow against his chest. "We're not dying here," he growled, his lips brushing her ear, a promise sealed in blood. They fought, Zsuzsa dragging Clara, Laszlo's chants faltering, the church a crucible where blood and faith would burn, Veronica's laughter a tide that threatened to drown them, Clara's curse a shadow that clung to their souls. Kisfather's church became a pyre, its stone walls cracking under Veronica's wrath, her yellow eyes a beacon of Clara's malice, her nuns a swarm of claws and ichor, their laughter a chorus of hate. Daniel fought back to back with Agnes, his dagger sparking, ichor spraying, his wounds afire, his love for her a vow that burned through pain. Julia slashed her knife, ash erupting, but claws raked her leg, blood welling, her scream echoing. Clara huddled behind the altar, her rosary glowing faintly, her chants a fragile shield, her eyes flickering red, Clara's grip tightening, a battle within her soul. Veronica raised her hands, red light flaring, the ceiling groaning, stones raining, her voice Clara's, your resistance is futile. Daniel slashed a nun, ash exploding, but claws raked his arm, pain blinding, his strength faltering. Agnes swung her knife, stabbing a nun's chest, ash erupting, but a claw slashed her shoulder, blood pooling, her scream piercing his heart. Agnes, he roared, tackling the nun, his dagger plunging, ash swirling, his vision blurring, blood dripping onto the stone. Julia pulled Laszlo to his feet, his bloodied face set, his chants resuming, holy water hissing on Veronica's skin, her scream shaking the walls. Clara's rosary flared, her voice joining Laszlo's, pushing Clara's grip back, her eyes brown, tears streaming, a plea answered. But Veronica's laughter swelled, her red light cracking the floor, pews splintering, flames licking from shattered candles, the church a crucible where faith would burn. Daniel caught Agnes, her blood mixing with his, their lips meeting in a desperate kiss, a vow sealed in blood. We'll end this, he whispered, his voice breaking, her eyes fierce despite her wounds. Julia dragged Clara, shouting, out, the church collapsing, stones falling, flames spreading, Veronica's laughter a tide that pursued them. They fled through a side door, the sanctuary crumbling, Laszlo's chants fading, his body slumped, blood pooling, his rosary fallen, a sacrifice that burned in their hearts, Clara's curse a shadow that clung, a promise to claim their blood. Kisvarda's streets burned under a dawn choked by fog, its cobblestones slick with ash and blood, a village scarred by Clara's wrath. Daniel carried Agnes, her wounds bleeding, her pulse faint, her face pale but fierce, her knife clutched, a vow that burned in his heart. Julia supported Clara, her rosary glowing faintly, her eyes brown but shadowed, Clara's whispers clawing her soul, her body trembling. The villagers, those who survived, emerged, armed with pitchforks, knives, torches, their faces grim, rallied by Julia's call, a community forged by loss, their courage a fragile light in the fog's grip. Veronica appeared, her nuns swarming, yellow eyes glinting, claws dripping ichor, her laughter Clara's, you cannot escape. Daniel set Agnes down, bandaging her arm, his hands trembling, her lavender scent a memory that burned through grief. Stay back, he said, his voice raw, a vow sealed in blood. She shook her head, gripping his hand, I fight with you, her voice a confession, their lips brushing, forbidden kiss that burned through the fog's chill, a courage a flame that steadied his heart. The villagers charged, a clash of steel and claws, screams mingling with shotgun blasts, flames flickering from torches. Daniel slashed, dagger sparking, ichor spraying, each strike a cry for Agnes, for Lily, for Clara. Julia fought, her knife plunging, ash erupting, but claws raked her chest, blood welling, her scream echoing. Clara's rosary flared, her chants rising, pushing shadows back, but Clara's grip tightened, red light flickering in her eyes, a battle within her soul. Veronica advanced, her hands glowing red, the fog tightening, her voice a command, your blood, Daniel, seals my pact. He charged, dagger raised, but her claws met his, sparking, pain exploding in his chest, blood dripping onto the cobblestones. Agnes slashed a nun, ash erupting, her knife trembling, her eyes locked on him, a vow unspoken. The village burned, flames licking houses, Clara's laughter a tide that threatened to drown them, the villagers' cries a chorus of defiance, a last stand against the wraith's wrath, their blood a vow to break her curse. His father's streets burned under a dawn choked by fog, the village a pyre of ash and blood, its cobblestones slick with the remnants of battle. Daniel Cole stood amidst the chaos, his silver dagger dripping ichor, his wounds a furnace of pain, blood seeping through his torn jacket. Sister Agnes leaned against him, her knife blooded, her pulse faint, her lavender scent a fading memory beneath the copper tang of her wounds. Clara Harris clung to Zhuzha, her rosary glowing faintly, eyes flickering between brown and red, Clara's whispers clawing at her soul. The villagers, blooded but defiant, fought with pitchforks and torches, their screams mingling with the crackle of flames, a desperate stand against Veronica's nuns, twisted by Clara's malice. Veronica's yellow eyes blazed, her laughter Clara's, "Your blood seals my pact," she hissed, her claws slashing, red light flaring, the fog tightening like a noose. Daniel's heart pounded, Agnes's hand in his avow, her courage a flame that burned through his grief for Lily, his guilt for Clara. He slashed, dagger sparking, ichor spraying, but Veronica's claws met his, pain exploding in his chest, blood dripping onto the stones. Agnes fought beside him, her knife plunging into a nun, ash erupting, her scream a defiance that echoed in a burning village. Zhuzha slashed her knife, ash swirling, but claws raked her arm, blood welling, her scream a mother's cry, her son's loss a fire that burned through pain. Clara's rosary flared, her chants pushing shadows back, but Clara's grip tightened, red light pulsing, her body trembling, a battle within her soul. The old woman, clutching Laszlo's journal, chanted, her voice a shield, runes glowing faintly, a fragile hope against Veronica's wrath. A rumble shook the village, the convent's distant spires trembling, pulse from the chalices ruling echoing, Clara's power unbound. Daniel's mind flashed to the ritual chamber, the chalice's blood, its pulse a heart that refused to die. The chalice, he gasped, his voice raw, his eyes on Agnes, it's not gone. Her eyes widened, fear mingling with resolve, it's her anchor, in the convent stones. Her words were a map to the abyss, a truth that tightened the curse's grip. Veronica lunged, claws slashing, but Daniel tackled her, dagger plunging, ichor spraying, pain blinding him. Agnes stabbed a nun, ash erupting, her blood mixing with his, their lips brushing in a desperate kiss, a vow sealed in blood. Zhuzha dragged Clara clear, shouting, "To the convent!" The villagers fell, their blood a sacrifice, their torches fading, but their defiance burned, a light in the fog. They fled, Daniel carrying Agnes, Zhuzha with Clara, the convent spires calling, Clara's laughter a tide, the chalices echo a vow to claim their blood. The path to St. Magdalene twisted through a forest of skeletal pines, fog curling like spectres, the air heavy with the convent's curse, pulse that echoed the chalice's ruin. Daniel led, carrying Agnes, her wounds bleeding, her pulse faint, her face pale but fierce, her knife clutched, a vow that burned in his heart. Zhuzha followed, supporting Clara, her knife blooded, her leg dripping blood, her face grim, a warrior forged by loss. Clara's rosary flickered, her eyes shadowed, Clara's whispers clawing, her chants a fragile shield, her body trembling, a vessel for the wraith's wrath. The convent's iron gates loomed, twisted, melted by unseen flames, wounds pulsing red, a heartbeat of malice. Daniel pushed through, the metal screeching, the courtyard a graveyard of ash, gargoyles shattered, their eyes bleeding ichor. The convent's walls groaned, windows cracking, the air thick with blood and decay, the tomb alive with Clara's hunger. "She's waiting," Agnes whispered, her voice trembling, her hand in his, a spark that burned through the fog's chill, a lover vow he'd keep. A figure stood at the cloister's entrance, Sister Esther, a new vessel, her habit pristine, eyes red, Clara's smile a serpent's. "Welcome," she hissed, her voice layered with hate, "the pact awaits." Nuns emerged, claws glinting, yellow eyes burning, their snarls a chorus of malice. Daniel slashed, dagger sparking, ichor spraying, his wounds afire, his resolve a blade. Julia stabbed, ash erupting, but claws raked her arm, blood welling, her scream echoing. Agnes fought, her knife plunging, ash swirling, her blood mixing with his, her eyes locked on him, a vow unspoken. Esther raised her hands, the ground quaking, roots bursting, wrapping Julia's legs, her knife falling, her scream a mother's cry. Daniel slashed, freeing her, but Esther's claws slashed his chest, pain blinding, blood dripping. Agnes tackled Esther, her knife grazing her arm, ichor spraying, but Esther threw her back, Agnes crashing into thorns, blood welling, her scream piercing his heart. "No!" Daniel roared, dagger plunging, Esther dissolving, her laughter echoing, the convent's curse a tide that pursued them. Clara's rosary flared, a chant pushing shadows back, but her eyes flickered red, Clara's grip tightening, her body trembling. Julia dragged her, shouting, to the crypt. The convent shook, stones falling, Clara's power swelling, the chalices echo a heartbeat in the stones, a vow to claim their blood, the crypt their only hope, a crucible where truth and terror would collide. The crypt beneath St. Magdalene was a tomb of blood and shadow, its air thick with decay, wounds pulsing red, a heartbeat that echoed the chalice's ruin. Daniel led, Agnes in his arms, her pulse faint, her blood staining his jacket, her face pale, a vow he'd keep. Julia supported Clara, her knife blooded, her wounds dripping, her face grim, a warrior forged by loss. Clara's rosary flickered, her chants a shield, her eyes shadowed, Clara's whispers clawing, her body trembling, a vessel for the wraith's wrath. The altar stood dark, cracked, but a new relic rested there, a second blood codex, its cover pulsing, pages whispering, a heart reborn from ash. "She remade it," Agnes gasped, her voice weak, her hand gripping his, "Clara's blood, it's in the stones." Daniel's heart sank, the locket burning, Lily's loss a wound reopened, a trap that bound him to Clara's curse. "We burn it again," he growled, setting Agnes down, dagger raised, his wounds afire, his resolve ablade. Esther materialized, red eyes blazing, claws dripping ichor. "You're too late," she hissed, Clara's voice, a storm that shook the crypt. Nuns surged, claws slashing, Daniel's dagger sparking, ichor spraying, his strength faltering, blood pooling. Julia stabbed, ash erupting, but claws raked her chest, blood welling, her scream echoing. Agnes grabbed a torch, thrusting it at the codex, flames faltering, Esther's claws slashing her, blood pooling, her scream piercing his heart. Daniel tackled Esther, dagger plunging, ash erupting, but his vision blurred, pain blinding. Clara's rosary flared, her chants rising, pushing shadows back, but her eyes flickered red, Clara's grip tightening. "Choose," Esther hissed, claws at Clara's throat, the nun, or the girl. Agnes's voice cut through, weak but fierce, "Save Clara." Daniel charged, freeing Clara, but Esther's claws slashed his back, pain exploding, the crypt shaking, stones falling, the codex's fire spreading, a pyre for their hopes, Clara's laughter a tide that promised blood. The crypt roared as flames devoured the second blood codex, its pages curling, Clara's scream a blade that cracked stone, a storm that shook the convent's heart. Daniel held Agnes, her blood soaking his jacket, her pulse fading, her eyes locked on his, a vow unspoken, her lavender scent a memory that burned through grief. Clara stood with Zuzia, her rosary glowing, chants pushing Clara's grip back, her eyes brown, tears streaming, a plea answered. Esther's form flickered, red eyes dimming, her laughter unrelenting, you've paid in blood, but my pact endures. Daniel's dagger slashed, forcing Esther back, his strength waning, wounds a furnace, blood pooling. Zuzia stabbed, ash erupting, but claws raked her chest, blood welling, her scream a mother's cry, her son's loss a fire that burned through pain. Clara's rosary flared, her voice rising, a defiance that burned through Clara's hold, her blood dripping, a sacrifice that steadied Daniel's heart. Agnes's hand gripped his, her voice a whisper, I love you, a confession that broke his heart, her eyes glistening, a spark in the gloom. Esther lunged, claws slashing, but Daniel tackled her, dagger plunging, ash erupting, pain blinding. The crypt collapsed, stones falling, flames spreading, Clara's scream fading, but her laughter lingered, a promise of return. Zuzia dragged Clara, shouting, out. Daniel lifted Agnes, her body limp, his heart shattering, the convent's heart a pyre, Clara's curse a shadow that clung. They fled through tunnels, stones raining, flames licking their heels, Agnes's pulse a vow, Clara's rosary a fading light, Zuzia's blood a sacrifice, the crypt a crucible where love and loss burned, Clara's laughter a tide that pursued. The tunnels beneath St. Magdalene groaned, stone walls cracking as flames chased Daniel and his companions, the blood codex's pyre a roar that echoed Clara's wrath. Daniel carried Agnes, her blood soaking his jacket, her pulse a fading whisper, her face pale, a vow he'd keep. Zuzia dragged Clara, her knife blooded, her wounds dripping, her face grim, a warrior forged by loss. Clara's rosary flickered, her chants fading, her eyes shadowed, Clara's whispers clawing, her body trembling, a vessel for the wraith's curse. Daniel's wounds burned, slashes weeping blood, each step a battle against collapse, but Agnes's love was a fire that burned through pain, her whispered, I love you, a vow that steadied his heart. The locket burned, Lily's relic, a trap that bound him to Clara, his guilt her fuel, a shadow tying his past to Clara's peril, to Agnes's blood. Keep moving, Zuzia growled, leading through the labyrinth, her map ash, their path driven by instinct, the convent's collapse a death knell. A rumble shook the tunnel, stones raining, dust choking the air, the walls closing like a grave. Daniel shielded Agnes, a rock grazing his back, pain searing, blood welling. Clara tripped, her rosary skittering, its glow dimming, Zuzia hauling her up, a nun crawling from shadows, claws slashing, ash erupting as Zuzia stabbed, her scream echoing, blood pooling. Clara's laughter hissed, you cannot escape, her shadow flitting, claws grazing Daniel's arm, pain exploding, his strength faltering. They reached a narrow exit, the forest's fog visible, but the tunnel collapsed, sealing the crypt. Daniel carried Agnes into dawn, Zuzia with Clara, the convent spires a distant scar, Clara's laughter a fading echo, a promise that her curse lived on. Agnes's eyes opened, weak, you saved us, her voice a whisper, her hand brushing his face, a spark in the cold. Daniel's heart broke, not yet, he said, his voice raw, the locket burning, a vow to end Clara, the forest a gauntlet, their blood a price unpaid. Kisvarda's ruins smoldered, the inner crumbling refuge, its walls scarred by fire, the air thick with ash and despair. Daniel staggered inside, carrying Agnes, her blood staining the floor, her pulse faint, her face pale, a vow he'd keep. Zuzia laid Clara on a table, a knife clattering, her wounds dripping, her face grim, a warrior battered by loss. The villagers gathered, faces grim, their hope a flickering ember, their eyes on Agnes, dirge for the fallen nun. Daniel cleaned Agnes's wounds, his hands trembling, her lavender scent a memory that burned through grief. "You're gonna make it," he said, his voice fierce, her eyes opening, weak but warm. "You give me hope," she whispered, her hand in his, a spark in the cold. Their lips met, a desperate kiss, a forbidden flame, her courage a vow he'd keep. Clara stirred, "She's still here," her voice trembling, her rosary dark, her fingers twitching, Clara's whispers clawing, her eyes shadowed. Juja's voice was sharp, "Clara's tethered, to the convent, or us." Her eyes on Clara, suspicion tempered by loss, her son's absence a mirror to Daniel's grief. The old woman, clutching Laszlo's journal, spoke, "The pact's in the convent's heart, a relic, Clara's chalice." Her words were a map, the journal detailing a chamber beneath the crypt, a vow to end Clara's curse. Daniel took it, its pages heavy, a path to salvation, or doom. The inn's door rattled, shadows moving, Clara's laughter echoing, "She's coming," Juja growled, knife raised, her blood dripping, a mother's defiance. Daniel stood, dagger gleaming, Agnes's hand in his, a vow sealed in blood, the convent's call a tie that pulled them back, Clara's curse a shadow that clung, their blood a price unpaid, the village a refuge soon to burn. His father's fog thickened, the living veil pulsing with Clara's malice, her laughter a blade slicing the dawn, the village a pyre of ash and blood. Daniel stood at the inn's door, dagger raised, wounds a furnace, Agnes beside him, her knife clutched, her pulse faint, her love a beacon in the gloom. Juja guarded Clara, her rosary dark, her eyes flickering red, Clara's whispers clawing, her body trembling, a vessel for the wraith's curse. Villagers, armed with knives and torches, formed a ragged line, their fear a weight, their courage a fragile light. A shadow surged, a nun, red eyes blazing, claws dripping ichor, Clara's new vessel, "You cannot hide," she hissed, her voice a storm, nun swarming, yellow eyes glinting, a tide of hate. Daniel slashed, dagger sparking, ichor spraying, his wound screaming, his resolve a blade. Juja stabbed, ash erupting, but claws raked her arm, blood welling, her scream echoing, her son's loss a fire that burned through pain. Agnes fought, her knife plunging, ash swirling, her blood mixing with his, her eyes locked on him, a vow unspoken. Clara's rosary flickered, her chants pushing shadows back, but her eyes flared red, Clara's grip tightening, her body trembling. "She's fighting me," she screamed, her hands clawing her face, blood welling. Daniel tackled a nun, dagger plunging, ash erupting, but his strength faltered, blood pooling, his vision blurry. Juja slashed a path, shouting, "To the convent!" The villagers fell, their blood a sacrifice, their torches fading, Clara's laughter a tide that drowned their cries. The inn's walls shook, shadows pounding, Daniel pulling Agnes, Juja with Clara, fleeing through a back door, the village burning, Clara's vessel pursuing, her red eyes a beacon, her claws a vow to claim their blood. Agnes's hand in his was a vow, her love a flame that burned through fear, the convent's call a tide that pulled them back, Clara's curse a shadow that clung, their blood a price unpaid, the fog a crucible where hope would burn. The forest path to St. Magdalene was a descent into shadow, fog curling like spectres, the air heavy with the convent's curse, pulse echoing the chalice's ruin. Daniel led, carrying Agnes, her wounds bleeding, her pulse faint, her face pale, her love a vow he'd keep. Juja followed, supporting Clara, her knife blooded, her wounds dripping, her face grim, a warrior forged by loss. Clara's rosary flickered, her eyes shadowed, Clara's whispers clawing, her chants a shield, her body trembling, a vessel for the wraith's wrath. The convent's gates loomed, twisted, runes pulsing red, a heartbeat of malice. Daniel pushed through, the courtyard a graveyard of ash, gargoyles bleeding ichor, the walls groaning, windows cracking, the air thick with blood and decay, a tomb alive with Clara's hunger. Esther stood at the cloister's entrance, red eyes blazing, the pact awaits, she hissed, Clara's voice, a storm that shook the stones. Nuns surged, claws glinting, yellow eyes burning, their snarls a chorus of hate. Daniel slashed, dagger sparking, ichor spraying, his wounds a fire, his resolve a blade. Zhuzha stabbed, ash erupting, but claws raked her chest, blood welling, her scream echoing. Agnes fought, her knife plunging, ash swirling, her blood mixing with his, her eyes locked on him, a vow unspoken. Esther raised her hands, roots bursting, wrapping Zhuzha's legs, her knife falling, her scream a mother's cry. Daniel slashed, freeing her, but Esther's claws slashed his arm, pain blinding, blood dripping. Clara's rosary flared, a chant pushing shadows back, but her eyes flickered red, Clara's grip tightening, her body trembling, she's stronger, she gasped, her hands clawing her face, blood welling. Zhuzha dragged her, shouting, to the chamber. The convent shook, stones falling, Clara's power swelling, the chalices echo a heartbeat, a vow to claim their blood, the crypt a crucible where love and loss would burn, Clara's laughter a tide that pursued. The crypt beneath St. Magdalene was a tomb of blood and shadow, its air thick with decay, runes pulsing red, a heartbeat echoing the chalice's ruin. Daniel led, Agnes in his arms, her pulse faint, her blood staining his jacket, her face pale, a vow he'd keep. Zhuzha supported Clara, her knife blooded, her wounds dripping, her face grim, a warrior forged by loss. Clara's rosary flickered, her chants a shield, her eyes shadowed, Clara's whispers clawing, her body trembling, a vessel for the wraith's wrath. A hidden door behind the altar, carved with Clara's chalice, pulsed like flesh, its surface warm, a heart reborn from ash. Daniel pried it open, the air reeking of blood, a chamber lit by green flame torches, shadows writhing, alive with Clara's malice. A chalice stood at the center, filled with dark blood, runes writhing, pulsing, Clara's anchor, her soul. It's her, Agnes gasped, her voice weak, her hand in his, destroy it. Esther materialized, red eyes blazing, claws dripping ichor, you're too late, she hissed, Clara's voice, a storm that shook the chamber. Nuns surged, claws slashing, Daniel's dagger sparking, ichor spraying, his wounds a fire, his resolve a blade. Zhuzha stabbed, ash erupting, but claws raked her chest, blood welling, her scream echoing. Clara's rosary flared, her chants rising, pushing shadows back, but her eyes flickered red, Clara's grip tightening, her body trembling, she's in me, she gasped, her hands clawing her face, blood welling. Daniel slashed, dagger plunging, ash erupting, but Esther's claws slashed his chest, pain blinding, blood dripping. Agnes poured holy water into the chalice, blood hissing, steam rising, Clara's scream cracking stone, you'll pay, her claws slashing Agnes, her body falling, blood pooling, her scream piercing his heart. Daniel shattered the chalice, blood exploding, flames erupting, Clara's shadow dissolving, the chamber shaking, stones falling, a pyre for their hopes, Clara's laughter a fading echo, a vow to claim their blood. The chamber beneath St. Magdalene collapsed, flames devouring the chalice's blood, Clara's scream fading, a storm that cracked stone, a pyre for her soul. Daniel held Agnes, her pulse gone, her blood soaking his jacket, her face serene, her vow broken. Clara stood with Julia, her rosary dark, her eyes brown, tears streaming, Clara's grip gone, a sacrifice paid. Julia's wounds bled, her knife fallen, her face grim, a warrior forged by loss, her son's absence a fire extinguished. Daniel's dagger lay blooded, his wounds a furnace, blood pooling, his heart shattered. Agnes's love a flame that burned through grief, her whispered, "I love you," a wound that bled eternally. The locket burned, Lily's relic, a trap that bound him to Clara, his guilt her fuel, a shadow tying his past to Clara's peril, to Agnes's death. "It's over," Clara whispered, her voice trembling, her hands trembling, "isn't it?" But Daniel's gut twisted, Clara's silence too final, a lie woven into the dawn's pale light. The convent shook, stones falling, flames spreading, a death trap closing in. Daniel lifted Agnes's body, his strength gone, his heart breaking, Clara beside him, Julia staggering, their escape a desperate race against collapse, the convent's heart a pyre, Clara's curse a shadow that clung. They fled through tunnels, stones raining, flames licking their heels, Agnes's body a vow, Clara's rosary a fading light, Julia's blood a sacrifice, the crypt a crucible where love and loss burned, Clara's laughter a tide that promised return. His father's dawn was a lie, its pale light casting shadows over the village's ruins, the fog lifting but the air heavy with loss. Daniel knelt in the forest, Agnes's body beside him, her blood a crimson testament, her face serene, a vow broken. Clara sat, her rosary dark, her eyes hollow, her sacrifice a mirror to Agnes's, to Lily's, a price paid in blood. Julia slumped, her wounds bleeding, her face grim, a warrior broken by loss, her son's absence a wound that mirrored Daniel's grief. The convent's ruins smoldered, a distant scar, Clara's laughter gone, her shadow banished, or so they hoped. Daniel's dagger lay blooded, its runes dark, his wounds a fire, his heart a ruin, Agnes's love a flame that burned eternally, her death a wound that bled. The locket shards, shattered, were ash, Lily's photo gone, a trap broken, but Clara's curse lingered, a seed in his blood, a whisper waiting to wake. Clara's voice trembled, "We did it, didn't we?" Her eyes searching his, a plea for hope, her hands trembling, her rosary dark. Daniel's gut twisted, the fog's absence too clean, Clara's silence a lie. He stood, dagger raised, scanning the forest. "Not yet," he said, his voice raw, his eyes on Agnes's body, a vow to end Clara's curse, even if it meant his blood. Julia's voice was grim, "She's in the stones, in us," her knife fallen, her wounds a testament to sacrifice, her resolve a fading light. The forest stirred, a shadow moving, Clara's laughter a faint hiss, a promise of return. Daniel lifted Agnes's body, Clara beside him, Julia staggering, their path to the village a gauntlet, Clara's curse a shadow that clung, their blood a price unpaid, the dawn a deception that promised no peace, a crucible where hope would burn. His father's ruins were a graveyard, the inner smouldering husk, its walls scarred by fire, the air thick with ash and despair. Daniel laid Agnes's body in the square, her blood a crimson testament, her face serene, a vow broken, her lavender scent a memory that burned through grief. Clara knelt beside her, her rosary dark, her eyes hollow, her sacrifice a mirror to Agnes's, to Lily's, a price paid in blood. Julia sat, her wounds bleeding, her face grim, a warrior broken, her son's absence a wound that mirrored Daniel's grief. The villagers gathered, faces grim, their hope ash, their eyes on Agnes, a dirge for the fallen nun. The old woman, clutching Laszlo's journal, spoke, "Clara's pact is broken," her voice heavy, but Daniel's gut twisted, Clara's silence a lie, a seed in their blood. He stood, dagger blooded, wounds a furnace, his heart shattered, Agnes's love a flame that burned eternally, her death a wound that bled. The locket's shards were gone, Lily's photo ash, but Clara's curse lingered, a whisper in his blood, a shadow waiting to wake. Clara's voice trembled, she's gone, right? Her eyes searching his, a plea for hope, her hands trembling, her rosary dark. Daniel's eyes flickered red, brief, a shadow in his reflection, his blood ran cold, his dagger raised, but the flicker was gone, the rosary inert, the dawn empty. Not yet, he said, his voice raw, his eyes on Agnes's body, a vow to end Clara's curse, even if it meant his blood. The convent's ruins smoldered, a distant scar, Clara's laughter a faint echo, a promise of return. Daniel walked away, Clara beside him, Julia staggering, their path a gauntlet, Clara's curse a shadow that clung, their blood a price unpaid, the dawn a lie that led nowhere, a crucible where hope burned, a seed of darkness waiting to bloom. His father's dawn was a cruel mirage, its pale light barely piercing the fog that clung to the village's smouldering ruins, a suffocating veil pulsing with the remnants of Clara's malice. The air was thick with ash, the acrid stench of burned wood and blood mingling with the damp chill, a requiem for the fallen. Daniel Cole staggered through the forest's edge, cradling Sister Agnes's lifeless body, her blood soaking his torn jacket, a crimson stain that marked his failure. Her face, serene yet pale, was a ghost of the woman who defied the convent's curse, her lavender scent lost beneath the copper tang of death, her whispered, "I love you," a wound that bled eternally in his heart. Clara Harris stumbled beside him, her rosary dark, its beads cracked, her bloodied arm limp, her eyes hollow with guilt and grief, her breath a fragile thread in the fog's cold embrace. The convent's collapse, a roar of stone and fire, echoed in their minds, the chalices ruin a hollow victory, Clara's final whisper, "You've only delayed me," a venomous promise that chilled their blood. Daniel's wounds were a furnace, slashes across his chest and back weeping crimson, his leg throbbing with each step, but grief for Agnes and rage for his sister Lily, lost 12 years ago, drove him forward. The locket, once Lily's, was ash in his pocket, its shards burned with the blood codex, a trap that had drawn him to this cursed village, his guilt Clara's fuel. Julia, the innkeeper who'd fought with a mother's fire, was gone, her sacrifice in his father's burning streets a wound that mirrored his own, her son's absence a shadow that merged with Lily's loss, Agnes's death, Clara's torment. They reached a village's barn, its wooden walls scarred by time, its door ajar, a frail refuge in the forest's gloom. Daniel kicked it open, the wood creaking like a mourner's sigh, and laid Agnes on a bed of straw, her body cold, her pulse gone, her face a vow he'd failed. He knelt, cleaning her wounds with trembling hands, a futile act of love, tears carving paths through the blood and grime on his face. "I'm sorry," he murmured, pressing his lips to her forehead, her skin a final memory, a wound that would never heal. Clara slumped against a wall, her voice trembling, "Is it over?" Her eyes searched his, a plea for hope, but her fingers twitched, as if tracing Clara's runes, a shadow flickering in her gaze, a sign the wraith's curse lingered. The fog thickened, the barn's walls creaking, a low rumble stirring the earth, as if the convent stones still pulsed with Clara's wrath. Daniel stood, silver dagger trembling, scanning the shadows, the air heavy with menace. "Not over," he rasped, his voice raw, his eyes on Agnes's body, a vow to end Clara's curse, even if it meant his blood. The locket's absence was a void, but its weight lingered, Lily's loss a trap that had ensnared him, Clara's peril a mirror to Agnes's fate. Clara's rosary lay dark, its glow extinguished, her voice a whisper, "She's still here, in us." Her eyes flickered red, brief, a shadow passing, and Daniel's blood ran cold, his dagger raised, the barn a crucible where truth and terror would collide, Clara's final trap a blade at their backs. The barn was a fragile fortress, its wooden walls groaning under the fog's weight, the air thick with the stench of damp straw and blood, a sanctuary defiled by Clara's lingering malice. Daniel stood guard, his silver dagger gleaming, its runes dark, his wounds a fire that threatened collapse, blood dripping onto the straw. Agnes's body lay still, her serene face a wound that bled in his heart, her lover vow he'd failed, her lavender-scented ghost beneath the copper tang of death. Clara huddled in a corner, her rosary dark, her bloodied arm trembling, her eyes darting, flickering red, Clara's whispers clawing at her mind, a vessel for the wraith's wrath. A low hum filled the air, unnatural, vibrating in Daniel's bones, pulse that echoed the chalice's ruin, a heartbeat of malice that refused to die. The barn's door rattled, claws scraping wood, Clara's laughter swelling, a storm that drowned their breaths. "You cannot hide," her voice hissed, seeping through cracks, a chorus of the damned, layered with centuries of hate. Daniel's grip tightened, heart pounding. "Stay back," he growled, stepping between Clara and the door, dagger raised, his body coiling, wounds screaming, a vow to protect the living, to honor the dead. The door burst open, a nun, Clara's new vessel, her red eyes blazing, claws dripping ichor, lunging inside, her habit tattered, her face a void. Daniel slashed, dagger sparking, ichor spraying, but her claws raked his arm, pain exploding, blood welling. Clara screamed, curling tighter, but Agnes's body, still on the straw, seemed to stir in the candlelight's flicker, a trick of shadow, or something worse. Daniel's heart seized, rage and grief colliding. "You took her," he roared, slashing again, ash erupting, but the nun dissolved, reappearing behind Clara, claws at her throat. "Her blood, or yours," Clara hissed, her voice a blade. Clara's rosary flickered, her voice chanting, a desperate shield, her hands trembling, blood dripping from her arm, a sacrifice that burned through Clara's grip. Daniel tackled the vessel, dagger plunging, ash swirling, but pain blinded him, his strength faltering, blood pooling. The barn shook, beams creaking, shadows surging, more nuns, yellow eyes glinting, claws slashing, a tide of Clara's malice. He fought, dagger sparking, each strike a cry for Agnes, for Lily, for Clara, his wounds a furnace, his vision blurring, the fog tightening like a noose. Clara's chants rose, her rosary flaring, pushing shadows back, her eyes brown, tears streaming. "She's in me," she screamed, her hands clawing her face, blood welling, a battle within her soul. Daniel slashed a nun, ash erupting, but his strength failed, his dagger slipping, Clara's laughter swelling. "You're mine," her voice hissed, a shadow of Lily's face flickering, red eyes glinting, a trap that broke his heart. The barn's walls held, but the fog pulsed, Clara's wraith a relentless hunter, the sanctuary a crucible where blood would seal their fate, a vow to face her wrath, no matter the cost. The barn burned with Clara's malice, its walls splintering under the wraith's assault, yellow eyes blazing, claws dripping ichor, their laughter a chorus of hate that drowned the dawn's faint light. Daniel fought, his silver dagger a blur, slashing shadows, ichor spraying, his wounds a fire, blood pooling on the straw, his heart a ruin of grief for Agnes, rage for Lily, hope for Clara. Clara stood, her rosary glowing, chants a fragile shield, her bloodied arm trembling, eyes flickering red, Clara's grip tightening, a battle within her soul, a sacrifice a vow that burned through fear. Clara's vessel surged, red eyes blazing, claws slashing. "Your blood seals my pact," she hissed, her voice a storm, the barn quaking, beams falling, dust choking the air. Daniel slashed, dagger sparking, but claws raked his chest, pain blinding, blood dripping. Clara's chants rose, her rosary flaring, pushing shadows back, but her eyes flared red, Clara's voice snarling, "She's mine." Daniel's heart seized, Laszlo's journal flashing, the pact's anchor wasn't the chalice, but a living soul, bound by blood and pain. "It's Clara," he gasped, his voice raw, but her eyes flickered brown, tears streaming. "No, it's you," she whispered, her rosary pressed to his chest, its glow searing, "Your grief, it's her chain." The truth was a blade, slicing through denial. Clara's pact wasn't Clara or Agnes, but Daniel, his guilt for Lily's loss a trap forged 12 years ago, his pain her anchor. The locket's shards, burned, were a lie. Clara's curse lived in him, a seed in his blood, a shadow that pulsed with his grief. Clara's vessel laughed, claws slashing. "You see it now," she hissed, her form swelling, the barn shaking, flames licking from fallen candles. Daniel tackled her, dagger plunging, ash erupting, but pain blinded him, his strength faltering, blood pooling. Clara poured holy water from Juge's flask, droplets hissing on the vessel. Clara's scream cracking wood, but her claws slashed Clara's arm, blood welling, her scream echoing Agnes's final cry. Daniel stood, dagger raised. "I'll end you," he growled, his eyes on Agnes's body, a vow to break Clara's chain, even if it meant his blood. The shadows swarmed, relentless, Clara's laughter a tide, the barn a crucible where blood and grief would burn. Daniel fought, dagger sparking, each strike a cry for Agnes, for Lily, for Clara, his heart breaking, the pact's anchor a truth he couldn't escape, a vow to face Clara's wrath, no matter the cost, the fog a shadow that clung, a promise of blood unpaid. The barn was a pyre, flames licking its walls, the air choking with ash and ichor, a crucible where Clara's wraiths swarmed, their yellow eyes blazing, claws slashing, their laughter a chorus of hate. Daniel fought, his silver dagger sparking, ichor spraying, his wounds a furnace, blood pooling, his heart shattered by Agnes's death, his guilt for Lily a chain that bound him to Clara's curse. Clara stood, her rosary glowing, chants a hammer against Clara's grip, her bloodied arm trembling, eyes brown but shadowed, her defiance a vow that burned through fear, a mirror to Agnes's sacrifice. Clara's vessel surged, red eyes blazing, claws dripping, "Your blood, Daniel, completes me," she hissed, her voice a storm, the barn quaking, beams falling, flames spreading. Daniel slashed, dagger sparking, but claws raked his chest, pain blinding, blood dripping onto the straw. Clara's rosary flared, her voice rising, "You won't take him," her chants a shield, her blood dripping, a sacrifice that burned through Clara's hold, her eyes brown, tears streaming, a plea for redemption. The truth of the pact's anchor, Daniel's grief, twisted in his mind, a trap forged 12 years ago, his guilt for Lily's loss a chain that bound him to Clara. "It's me," he gasped, dagger raised, but Clara's voice cut through. "No, we break it together," her rosary pressed to his chest, its glow searing, a vow to share the burden. Clara's vessel laughed, claws slashing, "You're all mine," her form swelling, the barn shaking, flames roaring, the death trap closing in. Clara poured holy water on the straw, flames hissing, Clara's scream cracking wood, but her claws slashed Clara's shoulder, blood welling, her scream echoing. Daniel tackled the vessel, dagger plunging, ash erupting, but his strength faltered, blood pooling, his vision blurring. Clara's chants peaked, her rosary flaring, pushing shadows back, her eyes brown. "I won't let you win," she screamed, her blood dripping, defiance that burned through Clara's grip, a vow to break the curse, even if it meant her blood. The barn collapsed, flames consuming, Daniel pulling Clara clear, Agnes's body lost in the pyre, his heart breaking, Clara's vessel dissolving, her laughter a fading echo, a promise of return. They fled into the fog, Clara's rosary dark, her pulse faint, Daniel's wounds a fire, his resolve a blade, the pact's anchor a truth they'd face, a vow to end Clara's curse, the forest a crucible where blood and hope would burn. The forest was a labyrinth of shadow, fog curling like spectres, the air heavy with Clara's curse, pulse that lingered despite the chalice's ruin, the codex's pyre. Daniel carried Clara, her pulse faint, her blood staining his jacket, her face pale, her rosary dark, a defiance a vow that burned in his heart. His wounds were a furnace, blood dripping, each step a battle against collapse, Agnes's death a wound that bled eternally, Lily's loss a chain that bound him to Clara's trap, his guilt the pact's anchor, a truth he couldn't escape. The convent's ruins loomed, a shattered monolith, its spires broken, wounds dim, but Clara's presence pulsed, a heartbeat in the stones, her laughter a faint hiss, a promise of return. Daniel laid Clara in the courtyard, her pulse fading, her eyes brown, tears streaming. "End it," she whispered, her voice breaking, her hand in his, a vow to break the curse. The locket's shards were ash, but its weight lingered, Lily's loss a shadow that merged with Agnes's death, Clara's peril, trap that had drawn him to his father, his blood Clara's fuel. A shadow stirred, not a nun, but Lily's face, red eyes blazing, Clara's voice hissing, "You're mine." Daniel's heart shattered, rage and grief colliding, dagger raised, "You took her," he roared, slashing, but the shadow dodged, claws raking his chest, pain blinding, blood dripping. Clara's rosary flickered, a chant rising, pushing Clara's grip back, her eyes brown. "It's you," she screamed, her hand clawing her arm, blood welling, a sacrifice to weaken Clara's hold, a rosary flaring, a light in the gloom. The convent's ruins shook, stones falling, Clara's shadow swelling, her claws slashing, but Daniel fought, dagger sparking, each strike a cry for Agnes, for Lily, for Clara, his heart breaking, his blood a vow to break the pact's anchor. Clara's chants peaked, her rosary searing, "Break it," she screamed, her blood pooling, her eyes fading, a vow to end Clara's curse, even if it meant her life. The fog pulsed, Clara's laughter a tide, the convent's ruins a crucible where blood and love would burn, a final call to face the wraith's wrath, a vow to end her reign, no matter the cost. The courtyard of St. Magdalene Convent was a desolate graveyard, its cracked cobblestones slick with dew, shrouded in fog that pulsed with Clara's fading malice, a ghostly veil under the dawn's bloodless light. Daniel Cole knelt beside Sister Agnes's lifeless body, her blood a crimson halo on the stone, her serene face a wound that bled eternally in his heart, a lavender scent lost beneath death's copper tang. Clara Harris lay nearby, her pulse faint, blood seeping from her slashed arm, her rosary dark, its cracked beads a silent requiem for her defiance. The convent's ruins loomed, spires broken, walls scarred, rooms dim but pulsing, a heartbeat of curse that refused to die, Clara's whisper, "You're mine," a venomous echo in the fog, a trap that had claimed Agnes, Lily, and now threatened Clara. Daniel's wounds burned, slashes across his chest and back weeping crimson, his body a furnace of pain, but grief for Agnes and rage for Lily, lost 12 years ago, fueled his resolve. The locket's shards, burned with the blood codex, were ash, but its weight lingered, a relic of his sister's absence, trap woven by Clara to break him, his guilt her anchor. Clara's sacrifice, her blood to weaken Clara's hold, mirrored Agnes's, a price paid in love and loss, but the wraith's curse pulsed, a seed in their blood, a shadow waiting to bloom. He clutched Agnes's cold hand, tears carving paths through blood and ash, his voice a broken rasp, I failed you, pressing his lips to her forehead, a final vow, her skin a fading memory of warmth. Clara stirred, her voice a whisper. She's in you, Daniel. Her eyes, brown but shadowed, flickered red, Clara's grip lingering, her rosary dark, her hands trembling. The truth of the pact's anchor, Daniel's grief for Lily, twisted in his mind, a chain forged in New York, a trap that had drawn him to his father, his pain Clara's fuel. Not just me, he rasped, standing, dagger trembling, scanning the fog. She's in us both. The courtyard silence was a lie, the convent stones pulsing, Clara's laughter a faint hiss, a promise of return, the air heavy with menace. A shadow moved, not a nun, but Lily's face, red eyes blazing, Clara's voice hissing, your blood completes me. Daniel's heart shattered, rage and grief colliding, dagger raised. You took her, he roared, slashing air, the shadow vanishing, fog swirling, a trick that tore at his soul. Clara's rosary flickered, her chants rising, weak but defiant. We end her, her voice breaking, blood dripping, a vow to break the curse. The convent's ruins groaned, a rumble stirring the earth, Clara's power unbound, the courtyard a crucible where blood and love would burn, a lament for the fallen, a vow to face the wraith's final wrath. The Hungarian forest was a cathedral of despair, its fog-drenched pines looming like silent mourners, their branches clawing the dawn's pale light, a labyrinth of shadow that pulsed with Clara's curse. Daniel carried Clara, her pulse faint, blood staining his jacket, her face pale, her rosary dark, her defiance a vow that burned in his heart. His wounds were a furnace, blood dripping, each step a battle against collapse, Agnes's death a wound that bled eternally, Lily's loss a chain binding him to Clara's trap, his guilt the pact's anchor, a truth he couldn't escape. The convent's ruins faded behind, a shattered monolith, but Clara's presence lingered, a heartbeat in the fog, her laughter a faint hiss, a promise of return. A low hum vibrated through the trees, unnatural, chilling his blood, roots twisting like serpents, the ground trembling, pulse echoing the chalice's ruin. Clara's voice trembled, she's here, her eyes flickering red, her fingers twitching, Clara's whispers clawing her soul, her rosary dark, its glow extinguished. Daniel gripped his dagger, its runes faint, heart pounding, keep moving, he rasped, scanning the fog, the forest a gauntlet of thorns, its silence a predator's hush. Shadows surged, wraiths, not nuns, their forms flickering, red eyes blazing, claws dripping ichor, Clara's voice hissing, you cannot escape. Daniel slashed, dagger sparking, ichor spraying, but claws raked his leg, pain exploding, blood welling. Clara swung a branch, weak but fierce, cracking a wraith's form, ash swirling, her scream echoing Agnes's defiance, a spark in the gloom. Stay back, she shouted, her rosary flickering, a faint glow pushing shadows back, her blood dripping, a sacrifice that burned through Clara's grip. The wraiths swarmed, relentless, their laughter Clara's, a tide of hate. Daniel fought, dagger a blur, each strike a cry for Agnes, for Lily, for Clara, his strength faltering, blood pooling, vision blurring. A wraith's claws grazed Clara's shoulder, blood welling, her scream piercing, but she chanted, rosary flaring, pushing them back, her eyes brown, tears streaming, you won't win. Daniel tackled a wraith, dagger plunging, ash erupting, but his body failed, dagger slipping, Clara's shadow swelling, Lily's face flickering, red eyes a blade in his heart, you're mine, she hissed, the trap that broke him. The forest shook, trees cracking, Clara's laughter a storm. Clara's chants rose, her rosary searing, pushing shadows back, her blood dripping, a vow to break Clara's hold. They fled, Daniel carrying her, the wraiths pursuing, their red eyes lanterns in the fog, His father's ruins their final refuge, a gauntlet where blood and hope would burn. Clara's curse a shadow that clung, a vow to claim their souls. His father's ruins were a graveyard under the dawn's pale deceit, its cobblestone streets choked with ash, the inner smoldering husk, a fragile refuge for the village's survivors. Daniel staggered inside, Clara in his arms, her pulse faint, blood staining his jacket, her face pale, her rosary dark, her defiance a vow that burned in his heart. His wounds were a furnace, blood dripping, his body a ruin, Agnes's death a wound that bled eternally, Lily's loss a chain binding him to Clara's trap, his guilt the pact's anchor, a truth that shattered him. The villagers, blooded, broken, clutching knives, gasped, their eyes on Clara, their whispers a dirge for the fallen, their hope a flickering ember in the fog's cold grip. An old woman, keeper of Laszlo's journal, approached, her coal-black eyes weary. She fought bravely, she said, her voice heavy, her hands trembling, a nod to Clara's sacrifice, to Agnes's loss. But Clara's not gone. Daniel's dagger trembled, his voice raw, she's in me, in Clara, in our blood. Clara's eyes flickered red, her fingers twitching, Clara's whispers clawing, her rosary dark, a weight around her neck, a sign the curse endured. We end her here, he said, his voice steel, setting Clara on a table, her pulse a vow he'd keep, his eyes burning with resolve. The inn's windows rattled, fog tightening, Clara's laughter a hiss slithering through cracks. She's coming, a villager whispered, his pitchfork trembling, fear a palpable weight. Daniel stood, dagger raised, wounds afire, Clara's stronger than her, he said, his hand on her shoulder, steadying her trembling frame. Her eyes met his, brown but shadowed. I'll try, she whispered, clutching her rosary, its faint glow a spark in the gloom, a vow to defy Clara's grip. Shadows surged through windows, wraiths with red eyes, claws dripping ichor, Clara's voice hissing, your blood seals my pact. Daniel slashed, dagger sparking, ichor spraying, villagers fighting with knives, torches, their screams a chorus of defiance, flames flickering. Clara's rosary flared, chants rising, pushing shadows back, her blood dripping, a sacrifice that burned through Clara's hold, her eyes brown. I won't let you win, she screamed, her voice breaking, a plea answered. Daniel fought, dagger a blur, each strike a cry for Agnes, for Lily, for Clara, his heart breaking, blood pooling, the inner crucible where love and loss would burn, Clara's curse a shadow that clung, a vow to claim their souls. The inn was a crucible of despair, its walls splintering under Clara's wraiths, red eyes blazing, claws slashing, their laughter a chorus of hate drowning the candlelight's flicker. Daniel fought, his silver dagger sparking, ichor spraying, wounds a furnace, blood pooling, his heart shattered by Agnes's death, his guilt for Lily a chain binding him to Clara's trap, his pain the pact's anchor. Clara stood at the bar, rosary glowing, chants hammering Clara's grip, her bloodied arm trembling, eyes brown, tears streaming, her defiance a vow that burned through fear, mirror to Agnes's sacrifice, to Lily's loss. Clara's shadow formed, Lily's face twisted, red eyes glinting, your blood completes me, she hissed, claws slashing, the inn quaking, beams falling, flames spreading from shattered candles. Daniel slashed, dagger sparking, but claws raked his chest, pain blinding, blood dripping, his strength faltering, vision blurring. Clara's rosary flared, chants rising, you won't take him, her blood dripping, a sacrifice that burned through Clara's hold, her eyes brown, a plea for redemption, a vow to break the curse. The old woman's journal glowed, wounds flaring, her chants joining Clara's, a shield against Clara's wrath, the inn shaking, dust raining, a death trap closing in. The truth of the pact's anchor, Daniel's grief, twisted, it's me, he gasped, dagger raised. But Clara's voice cut through. We break it together, a rosary pressed to his chest, searing, a vow shared. Clara's shadow laughed, claws slashing. You're all mine. Her form swelling, flames roaring, a crucible where blood would burn. Clara plunged her rosary into her arm, blood welling. Clara's scream cracking stone, her shadow faltering, red light fading. I'm free. Clara screamed, her eyes brown, her body falling, blood pooling, her rosary dark, a sacrifice that broke Clara's grip. Daniel caught her, heartbreaking, dagger raised, Clara's shadow dissolving, her laughter a fading echo, a promise of return. The inn's walls held, villagers' cries fading, Clara's pulse gone, her face serene, a vow paid in blood, a mirror to Agnes's, to Lily's, a price that shattered Daniel, Clara's curse a shadow that lingered, a seed in his blood, a whisper waiting to wake. His father's dawn was a cruel deception, its pale light casting shadows over the village's ruins, the inner smoldering husk, ash settling like snow, a requiem for the fallen. Daniel knelt in the wreckage, Clara's body beside Agnes's, their blood a crimson testament, their sacrifices a hollow victory that tasted of ash, their faces serene, vows paid in love and loss. The locket shards were gone, Lily's photo ash, Clara's scream silenced, her shadow banished, or so he hoped, but her curse lingered, a seed in his blood, a whisper waiting to wake. The old woman closed Laszlo's journal, her coal-black eyes weary, villagers weeping, their wounds a map of defiance, their hope extinguished, a village scarred by Clara's wrath. Daniel stood, dagger-blooded, wounds a furnace, heart a ruin, Agnes's love a flame that burned eternally, her death a wound that bled, Clara's sacrifice a mirror to Lily's, a price paid to break Clara's pact, or delay it. It's over, the old woman said, her voice heavy, but Daniel's gut twisted, Clara's silence a lie, the fog's absence a deception, the dawn a mask for darkness. He lifted Clara's rosary, beads cracked, and saw a flicker, red, brief, a shadow in his reflection, his eyes glinting, a seed of Clara's curse, trap that lived in his blood, his guilt her anchor, a truth that shattered him. He carried Agnes and Clara's bodies to the square, laying them under dawn's cold gaze, their faces serene, blood a vow he'd carry. I'm sorry, he whispered, tears falling, his hands brushing their cheeks, a final farewell. The villagers gathered, faces grim, torches dark. Clara's gone, they said, but Daniel's heart pounded, the rosary's flicker a warning, Clara's curse a shadow that clung, a seed waiting to bloom. He walked away, dagger in hand, his father fading, the convent's ruins a scar, the road a lie leading nowhere, a man unbroken but haunted, Agnes's love a fire, Lily's loss a wound, Clara's sacrifice a vow, Clara's curse a whisper in his blood, a shadow that promised return, the dawn a deception that hid the darkness within.